Democracy. Democracy is one of the most audacious creations in human history, a living system built on the belief that the power to shape nations should not rest in the hands of the elite few, but in the hearts and minds of ordinary people. It is the great equalizer, where a farmer's voice can carry the same weight as that of a billionaire, where a single ballot can challenge centuries of entrenched power. At its core, democracy is not simply a method of governance. It is a declaration that every person matters, that every voice has the right to be heard, and that the destiny of a people should be chosen by the people themselves. In its most unfiltered form, democracy manifests as direct participation, where citizens themselves vote on laws and policies, each decision a direct imprint of their collective will. There is a raw, almost electric intimacy in such a system, knowing that your opinion is not filtered through intermediaries, but carried into action by your own hand. Yet most often, democracy is expressed through representation, where leaders are elected to embody the voice of the people. This is a sacred pact, a silent but powerful agreement that these representatives will act not as rulers, but as servants of the public trusts. When honored, it fosters hope, unity, and progress. When broken, it breeds disillusionment, unrest, and the slow decay of the system from within. Democracy is not clean or quiet. It thrives in the noise of argument, the friction of differing visions, and the chaos of compromise. It invites disagreement because it knows that the weaving together of many perspectives makes a fabric far stronger than one dictated by a single thread. Yet its strength is also its vulnerability. It is not a fortress guarded only by laws, but a living organism sustained by participation. The moment people stop believing their voice matters, when cynicism replaces action, democracy begins to suffocate, not in an instant, but slowly, through the silence of those it depends upon. Its greatest threat is not always the sudden seizure of power by tyrants, but the steady erosion of civic engagement. When citizens choose apathy over action, when they surrender their role in the process, they do not just abandon their rights, they give them away. Still, democracy is resilient when people rise to protect it. It finds its strength in protests that shake the streets, in debates that challenge the powerful, in the quiet act of casting a vote that says, "I am here and I matter." Democracy is never finished. It is something each generation must rebuild, defend, and reimagine. It is not handed down like a relic. It is seized, protected, and renewed by those with the courage to demand it. Every law passed, every injustice challenged, every act of civic courage keeps alive its simple, defiant truth. Power belongs not to the rulers, but to the people who refuse to be ruled without their consent. Direct democracy. Direct democracy is the purest, most unfiltered expression of people's power, a form of governance where citizens themselves make the laws, unshielded by layers of political representatives, unfiltered by the compromises of backroom deals. It is the moment when the individual steps forward, not merely to ask for change, but to directly shape it. In direct democracy, there is no intermediary to interpret your will. Your voice is the decision, your vote the very ink that writes the law. This system carries with it a raw, almost intoxicating sense of agency. Every person is both ruler and ruled, architect and inhabitant of the same structure they help build. It is a political intimacy rarely seen in the modern world, where choices are often made by distant figures behind closed doors. Here, the decisions are forged in the open, and every citizen stands equally at the anvil. But with this freedom comes the immense weight of responsibility. In direct democracy, you cannot look to a politician to blame for a bad law. You voted on it, your neighbor voted on it, the entire community shaped it. The victories are sweeter because they are yours, but the failures cut deeper for the same reason. There is no buffer between the people and the consequences of their choices, no convenient scapegoat to absorb the anger. Direct democracy demands engagement, and it demands it from everyone. Apathy becomes dangerous, for when too many turn away, the few who remain decide the fate of all. This system flourishes only when the people are informed, attentive, and willing to wrestle with the complexities of governance. The ballot becomes not just a right, but a duty, a moment when you must weigh not only what is best for you, but what is best for the society you share. There is an undeniable beauty in the immediacy of it. When a law passes, it is not because someone in a far-off chamber decreed it. It is because your community rose together and said, "This is the path we choose." There is pride in knowing that the architecture of the law is built with your own hands. Yet, that same immediacy can turn volatile, for when passions flare, the law can swing wildly with the shifting winds of public sentiment. Direct democracy is a mirror that never lies. It reflects the will, the wisdom, and the flaws of the people with perfect clarity. It is the closest a society can come to holding the reins of its own fate, and it demands both courage and conscience to guide it well. Representative democracy. Representative democracy is a system built on trust, a trust so profound that it hands the voice of the people to chosen individuals, asking them to carry it into the halls of power and speak on their behalf. It is a compact between citizens and their elected representatives, a promise that those granted authority will not wield it for themselves, but as an extension of the people's will. In its essence, it is still ruled by the people, but channeled through the leadership they select. Unlike the raw immediacy of direct democracy, representative democracy accepts that governing is complex, that the decisions shaping a nation often require time, expertise, and constant negotiation. The citizens choose those they believe have the wisdom, skill, and integrity to navigate this complexity. In that act of voting, they do not surrender their power. They entrust it, hoping it will be returned in the form of just laws, wise policies, and a government that listens. But this trust is fragile. When a representative listens closely, champions the concerns of their constituents, and stands firm against corruption, the system thrives. The people see themselves in their leaders, and in return, the leaders see their duty clearly. Yet when that bond is broken, when representatives drift into serving their own interests or those of the powerful few, the betrayal cuts deep. The people feel unheard, invisible, and deceived, and the entire foundation of the system begins to shake. Representative democracy is a balancing act between freedom and governance. It allows for the diversity of voices to be distilled into action, making it possible for millions to be represented in a manageable, organized way. It tempers the chaos of constant popular votes with the steadiness of elected stewardship, but it also carries the risk of alienation, where citizens forget their own role in holding leaders accountable. The beauty of representative democracy lies in its potential to unite communities across vast distances and differences. A farmer in a remote village, a teacher in a bustling city, and a nurse in a small town can all send their voices to the same chamber through their chosen representative. But this system lives and dies by engagement. If citizens stop caring, stop voting, stop watching, the representatives answer to no one. It is, in the end, a shared journey. The people choose the path by selecting their guides, and those guides are bound, in both honor and obligation, to walk it for them. When the trust holds, representative democracy becomes more than a structure. It becomes the living heartbeat of a free nation. Republic. A republic is the embodiment of a powerful idea that the authority of a nation rests not in the whims of a single ruler, but in the rule of law and the consent of the governed. It is a system where the people choose representatives to act on their behalf, but those representatives are bound by laws that stand above any individual, no matter how powerful. In a true republic, no leader is a king, no office is beyond question, and no person is greater than the principles that form the foundation of the state. What makes a republic unique is its reliance on a framework of laws and rights designed to protect the people from the very leaders they elect. These laws are not suggestions. They are the backbone of the system, the guardrails that prevent the concentration of power and the erosion of freedoms. Leaders may come and go, but the law remains, outlasting ambition, resisting tyranny, and standing as a constant reminder that the government serves the people, not the other way around. The heartbeat of a republic is accountability. Even the highest offices are temporary, entrusted for a time but never owned. The people hold the ultimate authority, and through elections, they decide who will carry their voice forward. But this power comes with a responsibility to remain vigilant, to question those in power, and to ensure the laws are upheld even when it is inconvenient or uncomfortable. A republic is a defense against the dangers of unchecked rule. It understands the corrupting pull of absolute authority, and so it disperses power, separating it between branches of government, balancing it with oversight, and anchoring it in a constitution or charter. It is a system built not on blind faith in leaders, but on trust in principles that outlive them. There is a quiet dignity to living in a republic. The citizen is not a subject bowing to a monarch, but a stakeholder in a shared experiment. Every vote cast, every law debated, every right defended reinforces the truth that the republic belongs to its people. Yet, like all systems of freedom, it is fragile. If the people grow complacent, if they surrender their vigilance, the protections that define a republic can be dismantled piece by piece. A republic thrives only when its citizens understand that their rights are not gifts from the government, but inheritances they must guard. It is both a privilege and a duty to live under a system where the law is sovereign and where the people themselves are its ultimate authors and defenders. Parliamentary Republic. A parliamentary republic is a system where the heartbeat of governance lies within the legislature and the executive branch is born from it. Here, the people elect representatives to form a parliament, and from that body emerges the government, led by a prime minister who rises not through direct presidential election, but through the trust and support of the elected assembly. It is a system that blends the spirit of a republic's rule of law with the fluid, adaptive nature of parliamentary decision-making. In a parliamentary republic, the power is both shared and intertwined. The head of state, often a president, serves a largely ceremonial or symbolic role, representing the unity of the nation, while the prime minister and the cabinet carry the weight of governance. This creates a dynamic where leadership is not static, but can shift with the tides of parliamentary confidence. If the government loses the faith of the majority in parliament, it can be dissolved, replaced not by revolution or coup, but through the orderly mechanism of a vote of no confidence. The beauty of this system lies in its responsiveness. It can adapt quickly to political shifts, removing ineffective leaders without the paralysis of waiting for the next scheduled election. This constant accountability keeps leaders attuned to the needs of both the representatives who place them in power and the citizens those representatives serve. It is a reminder that political authority in a parliamentary republic is borrowed, not owned, and it can be reclaimed the moment it ceases to serve. But this closeness between the executive and legislative branches also brings a delicate fragility. Governments can rise and fall with dizzying speed if political alliances fracture or public support wanes. The same flexibility that allows for swift correction can also create instability, leaving nations to navigate frequent changes in leadership. In times of crisis, this volatility can be a strength, removing failing governments before damage deepens, or a weakness if it fuels uncertainty when steady hands are most needed. A parliamentary republic thrives on active representation, debate, and compromise. It is a place where political power is woven tightly with the will of the elected assembly, and where leaders live under the constant shadow of the people's judgment, delivered through their parliament. It is not ruled by one voice, but the ever-shifting chorus of many, all bound by the belief that no leader stands above the law, and no government stands without the people's consent. Presidential Republic. A presidential republic is a bold fusion of democracy and strong, centralized leadership, a system where the head of state and the head of government are one and the same, the president. Elected directly by the people, this leader does not owe their power to the legislature, but to the nation itself. In this design, the president stands as both the face of the country and the chief architect of its policies, wielding authority not as a monarch's birthright, but as a mandate granted through the will of the citizens. The strength of a presidential republic lies in its clear separation of powers. The legislature writes the laws, the judiciary interprets them, and the president enforces them. No single branch is meant to overpower the others, yet the president holds a unique position, a national figure capable of steering the course of the state with vision, decisiveness, and symbolic weight. In moments of crisis, the country looks to this one leader for direction, reassurance, and resolve. But this concentrated authority is a double-edged sword. In capable, principled hands, it allows for swift action and clear leadership, cutting through the gridlock that can paralyze divided governments. In the wrong hands, it can become a tool for overreach, eroding the checks and balances that protect the people from tyranny. The line between strong leadership and dangerous authoritarianism is perilously thin, and a presidential republic lives in the tension of that balance every day. This system thrives when the president understands their role not as a ruler above the law, but as its servant and guardian. The Constitution is the anchor, holding even the most powerful leader within the bounds of accountability. Elections become the ultimate test, moments when the people decide whether the one they placed at the helm has honored the trust given to them. The beauty of a presidential republic is the direct bond between leader and citizen. When a president speaks, it is not on behalf of a parliament that appointed them, but as the voice chosen by millions. This creates a deep sense of national identity and personal connection, as if the leader's triumphs and failures belong to the people themselves. Yet, the same people who grant that power must remain watchful, for in a presidential republic, the leader is not a sovereign, they are a steward, and the moment they forget this truth, the republic begins to serve them instead of the people, breaking the very promise on which it was built. Monarchy. Monarchy is one of the oldest forms of human governance, a system rooted in the belief that the fate of an entire nation can rest in the hands of a single family, a single bloodline, a single crown. It is the image of a ruler standing above their people, not because they were chosen, but because they were born into power, cloaked in tradition, surrounded by ceremony, and often believed to rule by divine will. In its most absolute form, a monarchy grants the ruler unchallenged authority, where their word is law and their will shapes the lives of millions. There is an almost mythic quality to monarchy. For centuries, kings and queens have been the living symbols of their nations, embodiments of culture, heritage, and identity. To some, a monarch is a figure of unity, a presence that outlasts governments and political upheavals, anchoring the people to their history. To others, it is a reminder of inequality, a system where power is inherited rather than earned, and where privilege is determined not by merit, but by birth. In its gentler forms, such as constitutional monarchy, the ruler becomes largely ceremonial, opening parliaments, presiding over national ceremonies, and serving as a unifying emblem while elected leaders govern. Here, The monarch is not a wielder of political power, but a guardian of tradition, a living thread tying the present to centuries past. In these systems, the crown has influence, but the people's representatives make the laws. Yet history is filled with monarchs who ruled with absolute control, shaping nations by decree and silencing opposition with force. Under such rulers, a country's fate could hinge on a single decision, a moment of mercy or a stroke of cruelty. This immense concentration of power could bring stability and decisive leadership, but it could also plunge entire kingdoms into chaos under the rule of the unwise or the tyrannical. Monarchy thrives on continuity. It offers the comfort of familiarity, the promise that the crown will pass from parent to child, preserving an unbroken line of leadership. But this very continuity can be its weakness, locking a nation into the rule of those who did not earn their power and may not deserve it. To live under a monarchy is to live under a symbol, sometimes a symbol of unity, sometimes of oppression. It is a reminder of how deeply human societies crave both order and tradition, and how easily power, once inherited, can be guarded as though it were a birthright carved into the very bones of a nation. Absolute monarchy. An absolute monarchy is the embodiment of power concentrated in a single human being, a system where the monarch's word is not just law, but the very definition of it. In such a realm, there are no checks to temper their will, no legislature to question their decisions, no court to overrule their command. The crown is not merely a symbol, it is the source from which all authority flows, and the ruler's desires can reshape the lives of millions with a single decree. In an absolute monarchy, the monarch's power is often cloaked in tradition, divine right, or the belief that they have been chosen by fate itself. The throne is passed not by merit or vote, but by bloodline, each successor inheriting not only wealth and privilege, but the unquestionable control over their nation's destiny. Their word can wage wars, redistribute fortunes, rewrite laws, and decide life or death without fear of opposition. For those living under such rule, the monarch becomes an almost mythical figure, part sovereign, part parent, part untouchable force of nature. Loyalty is often demanded, not requested, and dissent is not merely disagreement, but defiance against the very heart of authority. Some absolute monarchs rule with a sense of duty, seeing themselves as guardians of their people, shaping their kingdoms with care and vision. Others wield their power selfishly, turning the nation into an extension of their own desires, where the people exist to serve the ruler rather than the other way around. There is a strange allure to the stability an absolute monarchy can bring. Decisions are swift, unburdened by debate or bureaucracy, and the direction of the nation is clear because it mirrors the will of one mind. But with such concentrated power, the line between stability and tyranny is perilously thin. The fate of an entire country rests not in the balance of institutions, but in the temperament of a single individual. A just ruler can elevate a nation, a cruel or reckless one can destroy it. In an absolute monarchy, there is no illusion of shared power. The monarch reigns as both architect and master of the state, a figure who embodies the law yet stands above it. For the people, life under such a system is a constant reminder that their freedom, their safety, and even their future are tied not to a collective will, but to the will of one. Constitutional monarchy. A constitutional monarchy is a delicate balancing act between tradition and modern governance, a system where the throne still stands, but the crown's power is bound by the unyielding authority of law. Here, the monarch is not an absolute ruler, but a living symbol, a figure who embodies the history, identity, and continuity of the nation, while the day-to-day governing rests in the hands of elected leaders. It is a marriage of heritage and democracy, where the echoes of the past walk alongside the demands of the present. In this system, the monarch may open parliament, give speeches, or represent the nation on the world stage, but they do not command armies or unilaterally pass laws. Their authority is ceremonial, their influence subtle, and their presence often a unifying force in times of division. The true power resides in a constitution, whether written or unwritten, that dictates the limits of government and safeguards the rights of the people. There is something deeply human in the allure of a constitutional monarchy. The crown offers a thread of continuity in a world of shifting politics. Prime ministers may come and go, but the monarch remains a constant figure, untouched by partisan struggles. This stability can be a source of comfort, a reminder that the nation is bigger than any single government. Yet, this arrangement also carries an unspoken fragility. The monarch's survival in a constitutional role depends on restraint, on knowing that overstepping into political affairs risks eroding the very system that allows the monarchy to endure. Their power is not enforced by fear or force, but by tradition, public affection, and a shared belief that their place is to serve as a guardian of the nation's spirit rather than a wielder of political might. For citizens, a constitutional monarchy offers both the familiarity of an enduring symbol and the empowerment of self-governance. It allows a country to preserve its heritage without surrendering its freedoms, to honor its past while shaping its future. But like all forms of government, it depends on trust. Trust that the monarch will remain above politics, trust that elected leaders will respect the limits placed upon them, and trust that the Constitution itself will stand unshaken against the ambitions of any who would try to bend it. In its most successful form, a constitutional monarchy is not a relic of history. It is a living institution that adapts without losing its identity, reminding a nation that its strength lies not in crowns or titles, but in the enduring bond between its people, its traditions, and its laws. Elective monarchy. An elective monarchy is a paradox draped in royal robes, a system where the crown is not inherited by bloodline alone, but won through the decision of those granted the power to choose. It defies the timeless image of monarchies as fixed, hereditary destinies, replacing the certainty of lineage with the uncertainty of selection. In an elective monarchy, the throne is a prize that must be earned, a seat granted, not by accident of birth, but by the consent, sometimes of the people, sometimes of a select elite, who decide who will wear the crown. This form of rule carries with it a sense of drama and volatility. Each succession is not a foregone conclusion, but a contest, sometimes steeped in politics, alliances, and careful persuasion, other times shadowed by intrigue and betrayal. To be chosen is to be elevated above others of equal rank, to be crowned not simply because one's blood is royal, but because one's influence, vision, or power swayed the electors. Unlike a purely hereditary monarchy, where a prince or a princess spends a lifetime preparing for inevitable ascension, an elective monarch may rise from uncertainty to sovereignty almost overnight. This creates rulers who often begin their reigns with a sense of urgency, aware that their position is not secured by unbreakable tradition, but by the fragile mandate of those who place them there. It can inspire them to rule with a sharper sense of accountability, to please the power base that elevated them, but it can also tempt them into corruption, using their reign to cement personal loyalty rather than serve the greater good. The beauty of an elective monarchy lies in its flexibility. It can bring to the throne leaders chosen for their capability rather than their birth order, offering the possibility of wisdom, experience, and vision over simple inheritance. But with this flexibility comes danger. The process of selection can be manipulated, swayed by wealth, military might, or coercion. The crown in such times becomes not a symbol of unity, but a prize in a dangerous game. In an elective monarchy, every coronation carries the echo of choice, a reminder that even the most regal of thrones rests on the shifting sands of human decision. The monarch may wear the crown, but beneath it lies the knowledge that it was not destiny that placed it there, and that the same hands that crowned them can one day strip it away. Oligarchy. Oligarchy is the rule of the few, a system where power is concentrated in the hands of a small, elite group who shape the destiny of the many. It is not a governance born from the will of the people, but from the influence of those who possess wealth, status, or strategic control. In an oligarchy, leadership is rarely about public service. It is about preservation of privilege. Decisions are made behind polished doors, in rooms the public will never see, where the fate of millions can be decided over whispered agreements and shared interests. There is a cold efficiency to an oligarchy. The ruling few often operate with calculated precision, guarding their authority as one would guard a fortress. They rise to power not always through brute force, but through connections, resources, and the ability to shape systems in their favor. Their strength lies not only in what they control, but in how invisible their control can seem, appearing as stability, expertise, or inevitability, while beneath the surface, the machinery of self-interest hums relentlessly. To those outside this inner circle, life in an oligarchy can feel like moving within invisible walls. The laws may still speak of equality, but the reality is that the same few voices always seem to echo the loudest in the corridors of power. Elections may exist, but the choices are limited, the candidates often tied in one way or another to the ruling elite. Progress is carefully managed, and any change that threatens the established hierarchy is slowed, softened, or silenced entirely. Yet oligarchies often cloak themselves in the appearance of normalcy. They may present themselves as guardians of stability, protectors of economic growth, or stewards of tradition, and for many citizens this can be enough until the cracks appear, when wealth is hoarded at the top while the rest struggle, when opportunity becomes a privilege instead of a right, resentment grows. Oligarchy thrives on distance between ruler and ruled, rich and poor, decision maker and citizen. It relies on the belief that the many cannot or should not govern themselves, but every oligarchy carries within it a tension, a quiet instability. The more power it concentrates, the more it risks awakening the very force it fears most, the will of the people rising to reclaim what was never meant to belong to the few alone. Aristocracy. Aristocracy is a system built on the belief that the right to rule belongs not to the masses, but to the few, specifically those born into privilege, wealth, and social rank. It is governance shaped by lineage, where power is passed through bloodlines rather than earned through merit or granted by the will of the people. In an aristocracy, the rulers are not simply leaders. They are heirs to centuries of inherited influence, their status embedded in the very fabric of society. To live under aristocracy is to live in a world where class is destiny. The nobility stand at the top, draped not only in luxury, but in authority, making decisions that affect lives far beyond the walls of their estates. This system is built on the idea that those of noble birth possess qualities, wisdom, refinement, moral superiority, that make them uniquely suited to govern. Whether or not this is true, it becomes an accepted truth within the culture, reinforced by tradition, ceremony, and the passing down of both land and law. Aristocracy can carry a certain elegance, an aura of stability grounded in centuries of continuity. These ruling families often see themselves as custodians of the nation's heritage, defenders of its values and traditions. Their rule can be marked by patronage of the arts, the preservation of culture, and the maintenance of order. Yet, beneath this gilded surface, the system's fragility lies in its exclusivity. By concentrating power in the hands of a small, insulated class, it risks alienating the very people it governs. For those outside the aristocracy, the divide is stark. Opportunities are often limited by birth, and social mobility is rare. Resentment can fester in the shadow of privilege as the masses watch decisions made by those who may never fully understand their struggles. When the nobility grow detached from the realities of ordinary life, governance shifts from stewardship to self-interest, and the gap between ruler and ruled becomes a chasm. Still, aristocracy persists in part because it is self-reinforcing. Wealth breeds influence. Influence protects wealth, and tradition sanctifies both. It can endure for generations until the weight of inequality sparks the unrest that history has shown can topple even the most entrenched noble houses. In its grandeur and in its fragility, aristocracy is a reminder that power without broad inclusion may dazzle for a time, but it forever walks the edge between loyalty and rebellion. Plutocracy. Plutocracy is the rule of wealth, a system where political power bends not to the will of the majority, nor to the principles of law and equality, but to the sheer weight of money. In a plutocracy, influence is bought, not earned. The halls of power echo with the voices of the richest few, while the majority watch from outside, their voices muffled by the towering walls of privilege. It is a governance where wealth is not just an advantage, it is the ticket to shaping the rules that govern everyone else. In such a system, money does more than purchase comfort or luxury. It becomes the currency of control. The wealthiest individuals or corporations can steer elections through donations, sway public opinion through media ownership, and bend legislation to protect and expand their fortunes. Laws are crafted with their interests in mind, tax codes are sculpted to preserve their power, and economic systems are shaped to keep them at the top. The danger of a plutocracy lies not only in its imbalance, but in its subtlety. It rarely announces itself with crowns or military coups. Instead, it seeps in quietly, disguising influence as philanthropy, control as free market efficiency, and self-interest as national interest. Over time, the divide between the powerful and the powerless grows until it is not merely economic, but political, cultural, and almost unbridgeable. For those on the outside, living under a plutocracy can feel like moving through a world tilted against them. Opportunities shrink, wages stagnate, and upward mobility becomes a story told in the past tense. The wealthy may speak of equal opportunity, but they live in a realm where doors open before them while others are left knocking. Yet plutocracy is not just a threat to the poor, it is a danger to democracy itself. When wealth dictates who holds power and what policies are pursued, the concept of government by the people becomes an illusion. Votes still exist, but their power is diluted by the overwhelming influence of money, until elections feel less like choices and more like confirmations of decisions already made by the elite. A plutocracy thrives when people accept that the rich will always rule, when cynicism replaces outrage, and when the majority begins to believe their role in shaping the future is too small to matter. But beneath its polished surface, it carries a truth that is as dangerous as it is simple. When wealth becomes the sole voice of a nation, justice, equality, and freedom become luxuries that few can afford. Technocracy. Technocracy is the rule of the expert, a system where the reins of power are placed not in the hands of politicians, monarchs, or populist leaders, but in those who possess specialized knowledge and technical mastery. In a technocracy, decisions are not made based on charisma, political promises, or party loyalty, but on data, skill, and expertise. It is a vision of governance where engineers, scientists, economists, and other specialists shape policy with the precision of their disciplines, believing that society runs best when guided by those who understand its most complex mechanisms. At its heart, technocracy is born from frustration with politics as usual, the endless debates, the compromises that dilute solutions, the influence of ideology over truth. In its place, technocracy seeks a kind of rational purity, where problems are approached like equations to be solved, not battles to be won. The technocrats' authority is rooted in competence. Their legitimacy comes not from winning votes, but from mastering the systems they govern. There is a certain allure to the idea. Imagine a world where climate policy is crafted entirely by climate scientists, where economic systems are shaped by those who understand their deepest intricacies, where technology and infrastructure are overseen by the very minds who build them. In theory, this creates efficiency, reduces waste, and shields decisions from the chaos of partisan politics. It promises progress, free from the drag of ignorance. But technocracy carries its own shadows. Expertise does not guarantee wisdom, and technical brilliance does not always understand the human heart. A purely technocratic system can drift into cold calculation, valuing efficiency over empathy, treating citizens as variables in a formula rather than individuals with stories, struggles, and dreams. When leadership is defined solely by specialized knowledge, those without such expertise can feel alienated, voiceless in the shaping of their own future. Power in a technocracy often concentrates quietly, held by those whose authority is difficult to challenge because their work is complex, their language dense, their reasoning inaccessible to most. This can breed a dangerous complacency where the governed surrender oversight, trusting that the experts know best, until the day they don't. Technocracy stands at the intersection of brilliance and risk. It is governance as a science experiment with society itself as the subject. And while it can lead to remarkable breakthroughs, it also demands vigilance, for the greatest danger is not that experts will fail in their knowledge, but that they will forget the people they were meant to serve. Theocracy. Theocracy is the rule of the divine, at least in theory. It is a system where the authority to govern does not come from the people, but from a higher power, interpreted and enforced by human hands. In a theocracy, religion is not merely a personal belief or cultural tradition. It is the very spine of the state, its laws rooted in sacred texts, its leaders claiming to serve as the earthly voice of the divine will. The ruler may be a priest, a cleric, or a council of religious scholars, but their power is framed not as political, rather as spiritual duty, an authority that answers to heaven, not to the people. There is a deep, almost unshakable strength in a theocracy's foundation. When laws are believed to come from God, they are seen not as negotiable policies, but as eternal truths. To question them is to challenge not just the government, but the faith itself. This creates a unity that can bind a nation together with extraordinary force as people rally around a shared belief system that shapes every part of life, from the courts to the schools, from the markets to the family home. But that same strength can become suffocating. In a theocracy, there is little room for dissent, because disagreement is often framed as heresy. Freedom of belief can shrink to nothing when the state itself decides what is holy and what is forbidden. Leaders may begin as servants of faith, yet the temptation to use divine authority as a shield for political control is powerful. The line between religious guidance and absolute rule can vanish, leaving no place for accountability. For the devoted, living under a theocracy can feel like alignment between heaven and earth, a world where governance and faith walk in perfect step. For those outside the faith, or those who interpret it differently, it can feel like captivity, an unbreakable chain forged from sacred words. Theocracy wields both the power of belief and the force of law, and in that combination lies its greatest influence and its greatest danger. It binds its people not just through governance, but through the deepest layers of their identity, making resistance not merely rebellion against a ruler, but defiance against God himself. In such a system, loyalty is both political and spiritual, and breaking it can feel like tearing at the very soul of the nation. Ecclesiocracy. Ecclesiocracy is a form of rule where the power of the state flows directly from the authority of the clergy, where religious leaders are not merely guides of faith but governors of law, policy, and daily life. In such a system, the sacred and the political are fused into one, and Scripture becomes the foundation upon which governance is built. The rulers wear robes instead of crowns, carry holy texts instead of constitutions, and interpret divine will as the ultimate source of legitimacy. To live under an ecclesiocracy is to inhabit a world where morality is not just encouraged but enforced, where the boundaries of right and wrong are drawn by religious doctrine rather than civic debate. Laws are crafted to mirror sacred teachings, and disobedience is not merely a civil offense. It can be framed as sin, rebellion not just against the state, but against the divine itself. In this way, the reach of authority penetrates deeply into the private lives of citizens, governing not only their actions but often their thoughts, beliefs, and personal choices. For the faithful, ecclesiocracy can feel like the purest form of governance, a system that aligns earthly law with eternal truth, where the nation's leaders are seen as shepherds guiding the flock towards spiritual salvation as well as societal order. In times of moral crisis or instability, it can offer a powerful sense of unity, drawing the people together under a shared belief system that transcends class, wealth, and background. Yet this merging of faith and governance carries both potency and peril. When spiritual authority holds political power, dissent becomes dangerous, not just politically, but theologically. To oppose a law is to oppose the faith, and to challenge a leader is to risk being cast as a heretic. Those outside the dominant religion can find themselves marginalized, silenced, or even persecuted as the machinery of the state works to protect the purity of belief. Ecclesiocracy wields a unique strength in its ability to inspire devotion and obedience, but it also walks a fragile line. If the people begin to question the moral authority of their leaders, if hypocrisy takes root among the clergy, the disillusionment can be profound. In such moments, faith itself becomes entangled in the anger against governance, and the same divine power that once united the nation can become the force that drives it apart. In its purest form, ecclesiocracy is governance with a soul, but one that demands unwavering faith to survive. Autocracy is the distilled essence of singular power, a system where one individual holds complete unquestioned authority over the state and its people. In an autocracy, there are no rivals, no meaningful checks, and no true division of power. Every law, every decision, every fate of a citizen flows from the will of one person. It is not governance by consensus or negotiation. It is rule by command. There is an undeniable allure to such concentrated power, both for the ruler and, at times, even for the ruled. For the leader, it is the ability to act without hesitation, to bend a nation's direction at will, to stamp their vision onto the world without compromise. For some citizens, especially in times of fear or crisis, an autocracy can seem like a refuge, a promise of decisive action, of a single voice cutting through the chaos of debate. But this promise carries a price, and it is often paid in freedom. In an autocracy, dissent is not a political choice, it is a risk. The absence of competing powers means there is no one to stop the ruler from silencing opposition, rewriting laws, or reshaping institutions to secure their grip. Over time, the leader's will becomes the law, and the people's role shifts from participants in governance to subjects under control. Public opinion may still exist, but it is managed, manipulated, or ignored entirely. Such a system often cloaks itself in the language of stability and order. The ruler may present themselves as the guardian of unity, the protector against foreign threats, or the savior from internal decay. And yet, behind this facade, power is guarded not for the people's benefit, but for the preservation of the leader's reign. loyalty becomes the highest currency, and truth is whatever the ruler declares it to be. The most dangerous aspect of autocracy is its ability to become self-perpetuating. Without limits, the ruler shapes the state in their own image, appointing loyalists, controlling the flow of information, and ensuring no pathway exists for genuine change. Even when such regimes collapse, they often leave behind systems so warped by concentrated power that rebuilding democracy becomes an uphill battle. Autocracy thrives in the absence of resistance, in the silence of those who decide their voices will not matter. And once the machinery of absolute control begins turning, it feeds on itself until the will of one stands unchallenged over the will of all. In its shadow, a nation's future belongs not to its people, but to the unblinking ambitions of a single ruler. Dictatorship. A dictatorship is the raw, unvarnished face of absolute power, a system where the will of one person eclipses the voices of millions. In a dictatorship, the ruler's word is law, not because it has been debated or agreed upon, but because it has been declared. There are no competing visions, no meaningful opposition, no checks to temper ambition. The machinery of the state exists to amplify the dictator's voice and silence all others. It often begins with a promise: order in the face of chaos, strength in the midst of uncertainty. A leader rises, claiming they alone can protect the nation, that their rule will restore stability and pride. At first, the people may welcome the decisiveness, the simplicity of having one figure to follow, but over time, that simplicity hardens into something darker. The same power that allows swift action also smothers dissent. The press is muzzled, critics vanish. Elections, if they exist, become hollow rituals. The nation becomes a mirror that reflects only the leader's image. Under a dictatorship, fear is both a weapon and a currency. It seeps into daily life, teaching citizens to measure their words, to glance over their shoulders before speaking, to swallow truths that might cost them their safety. Friends grow cautious with each other, neighbors stop asking questions, and public life becomes an echo chamber of praise for the one who sits at the top. Yet the dictator's grip is never truly secure, for absolute rule breeds both loyalty and quiet resentment. The same centralization of power that allows a dictator to dominate also makes the system fragile. Remove the leader, and the structure can collapse in an instant. This is why dictators cling so desperately to control, surrounding themselves with loyal enforcers, rewriting laws to cement their rule, and reshaping history to place themselves at its center. A dictatorship can cloak itself in many disguises: military uniforms, revolutionary rhetoric, or the language of national salvation. But beneath them all lies the same truth: one person's will stands above all others, and in that imbalance, a nation's destiny becomes the possession of a single hand, gripping tightly, unwilling to ever let go. Military dictatorship. A military dictatorship is the rule of the uniform, a government where the chain of command replaces the ballot box, and political authority is held not by elected leaders, but by those who command soldiers, tanks, and weapons. In this system, power does not emerge from the will of the people, but from the grip of armed force. The state is run with the discipline of a barracks and the authority of a battlefield, where orders flow from the top down, and questioning them can carry the weight of treason. It often rises in times of chaos, when civilian governments falter, and the military steps in promising stability, order, and protection from collapse. At first, there can be a sense of relief. Streets grow quieter, unrest is met with swift control, and the uncertainty of politics is replaced by the clarity of command. But beneath that order lies a truth. In a military dictatorship, stability is enforced at gunpoint, and obedience is not earned, it is demanded. The leaders of such regimes rule with the mindset of war. Dissent is treated as an enemy to be crushed, protests as insurrections to be neutralized, civil freedoms shrink under the weight of national security, and the people learn that the right to speak, to gather, or to challenge power exists only at the mercy of those holding it. Laws can be rewritten overnight, courts can be silenced, and the Constitution, if it remains at all, becomes little more than a ceremonial relic. There is a harsh efficiency to military rule. Decisions are made quickly, and orders are carried out without debate. For some, this decisiveness feels like strength, especially in times of crisis. But for others, it becomes a suffocating reality where every aspect of life is under watch, where the machinery of the state is designed not to serve the people, but to control them. A military dictatorship survives through fear and loyalty. Fear in the hearts of those it rules, loyalty among the ranks of those who enforce its will. Yet such loyalty is fragile, for the same force that seizes power by the gun can lose it the same way. And while the weapons of the state may silence voices, they cannot erase the memory of freedom from those who have tasted it. In the shadow of a military dictatorship, the people live under the quiet tension that one day the very soldiers who hold them down may themselves decide to set them free or to crush them further. Authoritarianism. Authoritarianism is the rule of concentrated power, a system where authority flows from the top down and the will of the leader, or the ruling elite, overrides the will of the people. In such a government, obedience is not requested, but demanded, and individual freedoms are often sacrificed in the name of order, unity, or security. The state becomes a towering figure in the lives of its citizens, watching, guiding, and restraining them, with little tolerance for voices that challenge its control. In an authoritarian regime, power is centralized so tightly that it becomes inseparable from the identity of the ruler or ruling party. Decisions are made quickly, without the slow negotiations or compromises that define more open systems. To some, this decisiveness can appear efficient, even appealing, especially in times of chaos or uncertainty. But beneath this efficiency lies a darker truth. When all power is concentrated, there is little room for accountability, and those who lead often shape the law to protect themselves above all else. Life under authoritarianism is defined by boundaries you cannot cross. Speech, press, and assembly are monitored, controlled, or outright forbidden. The right to question authority is replaced by the expectation to accept it, and those who defy it may face consequences designed not just to punish, but to instill fear. The state often cloaks itself in the language of protection, protecting culture, stability, or national identity, yet the real protection is often for the power structure itself. The ruler in an authoritarian system may cultivate a personality cult, presenting themselves as the embodiment of the nation's strength, wisdom, and destiny. Citizens are encouraged to see loyalty not as a choice, but as a duty, an inseparable part of being a good member of society. Over time, this enforced loyalty can blur the lines between patriotism and submission, making it difficult to separate devotion to one's country from obedience to its leader. Authoritarianism survives not only through force, but through the quiet erosion of opposition. By limiting information, silencing critics, and controlling institutions, the regime makes alternatives seem impossible. And yet, its greatest weakness lies in this very control. The more a society is forced into silence, the more resentment can build beneath the surface. When it finally cracks, it does so with a force that is often unpredictable, reminding the world that power, no matter how absolute it appears, is never unshakable. Totalitarianism. Totalitarianism is the absolute surrender of a society to the grip of the state, a system where power does not simply govern the people, but consumes every aspect of their existence. It is not content with ruling over laws and institutions. It reaches into homes, thoughts, and even private dreams, demanding loyalty that is not merely political but personal. In a totalitarian state, the government is not a part of life. It becomes life itself, dictating what you may believe, how you must act, and who you are allowed to be. Unlike ordinary dictatorships, totalitarianism does not settle for obedience. It seeks devotion. It builds a reality where the leader's vision is the only truth, enforced by propaganda so relentless and omnipresent that lies become indistinguishable from facts. The media, the schools, the arts, and even religion are brought under the state's control, each repurposed to shape citizens into tools of the regime. Individuality becomes dangerous, independence suspect, and the very act of thinking freely a silent rebellion. Fear is the lifeblood of totalitarianism. Surveillance becomes constant, not just from hidden state agents, but from neighbors, colleagues, and even family members coerced into watching and reporting on one another. The uncertainty of who is loyal and who might betray you fractures communities, making collective resistance nearly impossible. Every public word must be weighed, every private thought guarded, because in this system, even suspicion can be a death sentence. Totalitarian regimes thrive on creating enemies, both real and imagined, to justify their absolute control. These enemies might be foreign powers, ethnic minorities, dissidents, or any group the state chooses to vilify. By keeping the population in a state of perpetual fear and anger, the regime ensures that people rally to the government for protection, even as it is the government itself that strips away their freedom. The most chilling aspect of totalitarianism is its ambition to rewrite not only the present, but also the past and future. History is altered to serve the regime's narrative, and those who challenge it vanish, not just physically, but from records, photographs, and collective memory. It is a system that seeks not just to control people's actions, but to own their reality. In totalitarianism, there is no refuge, not in politics, not in faith, not in family, and not in the quiet sanctuary of one's own mind. The state's reach is endless, and in its shadow, the individual ceases to exist as anything more than a servant to the power that claims every part of their life. Despotism. Despotism is the rule of power unbound, where the will of one ruler becomes the inescapable weight pressing down on an entire people. It is not simply the concentration of authority, but its expression in cruelty, oppression, and the relentless pursuit of control. In a despotic system, the ruler does not merely govern, they dominate, shaping the lives, thoughts, and futures of their subjects according to their own desires, with no law or conscience to restrain them. A despot's rule is not sustained through trust or consent, but through fear. It is the fear of punishment for speaking too loudly, of disappearance for questioning too boldly, of retribution for even the hint of disloyalty. In such a world, the truth becomes dangerous. Conversations shrink to whispers, glances carry hidden warnings, and the safest public expression is blind praise. People learn to wear masks, hiding their true thoughts behind the appearance of obedience, because survival depends on invisibility. Despotism thrives on the belief that the ruler is untouchable. They place themselves above the law, beyond the reach of justice, and often above morality itself. Their word becomes reality, not because it is wise or right, but because no one dares to oppose it. Under such a grip, the state transforms into an extension of the despot's will, its armies their sword, its courts their shield, its economy their personal treasury. The cruelty of despotism is not always loud or dramatic. It can be quiet, methodical, and suffocating, crushing ambition, stripping away freedoms piece by piece until the people no longer remember what it felt like to live without fear. In time, it can twist the spirit of a nation, replacing hope with resignation and individuality with submission. Yet every despot, rules with the knowledge, sometimes buried, sometimes blinding, that their power rests on a fragile foundation. Absolute control breeds resentment, and resentment can smolder for years, waiting for a spark. For all their dominance, despots fear the day the people stop fearing them. Despotism is not simply about authority, it is about the corrosion of humanity itself, where one person's will consumes the freedoms, dignity, and dreams of an entire society. In its shadow, life becomes survival, and the air is heavy with the unspoken truth that the ruler's grip will never loosen willingly. Kleptocracy is the rule of thieves, a government where power is not used to serve the people, but to strip them of their wealth, their resources, and their future. In a kleptocracy, corruption is not a flaw in the system, it is the system. Those in power treat the state as their personal vault, raiding public funds, selling influence, and using every lever of authority to enrich themselves and their allies while the nation bleeds. It often hides behind a facade of normal governance. Elections may still be held, speeches made, and laws passed, but beneath the surface, every decision is calculated for profit. Infrastructure projects become vehicles for embezzlement, foreign aid disappears into offshore accounts, and government contracts flow to friends and family like an endless tide of stolen opportunity. The state's institutions, its police, courts, and ministries are bent not toward justice, but toward protecting the hands that steal. In a kleptocracy, poverty is not an accident, it is a byproduct of greed. The roads crumble, schools decay, hospitals run dry, yet the ruling class thrives in palaces and private jets. The gap between the rulers and the ruled becomes an unbridgeable chasm, filled with mistrust, resentment, and despair. Ordinary citizens watch as the nation's wealth is drained away, knowing that their labor funds luxuries they will never touch. The cruelty of a kleptocracy lies in its shamelessness. The theft is often done in plain sight, masked by propaganda and legal loopholes, as if daring the people to stop it, and stopping it is nearly impossible, for the same leaders who rob the state also control the machinery that could hold them accountable. Yet, kleptocracy carries within it a silent danger for its own architects. The more it robs, the more it rots the very foundations it stands on. The economy withers, public trust collapses, and unrest simmers beneath the surface. For while fear can keep people silent for a time, hunger and rage have a way of breaking through. A kleptocracy is not just the betrayal of a nation's trust, it is the slow suffocation of its future. And in every citizen forced to live under its shadow, there remains a quiet truth the rulers fear most. Wealth can be stolen, but the will to rise against theft can never be entirely erased. Stratocracy. Stratocracy is a form of rule where the state and the military are one and the same, where the armed forces are not merely the protectors of the nation, but its governors. In such a system, the chain of command extends beyond the battlefield and into every corner of civilian life. Generals and officers do not just lead soldiers, they shape laws, control resources, and decide the nation's direction with the precision and discipline of a military campaign. Life under a stratocracy is defined by order, hierarchy, and an unyielding sense of duty. The language of governance becomes the language of command, clear, absolute, and unquestionable. Decisions are executed with speed and efficiency, unencumbered by the delays of political debate. To some, this structure offers a sense of stability, a confidence that those in charge are decisive, capable, and willing to defend the nation at any cost. But stability in a stratocracy is a double-edged sword, for it is achieved through rigid control, and dissent is often treated as insubordination, a threat to be neutralized rather than a viewpoint to be heard. In this system, military service is not simply a career. It becomes the primary qualification for leadership. Civilian authority, if it exists at all, is overshadowed by the authority of those in uniform. The values of the military, discipline, loyalty, obedience are elevated above all others, shaping education, policy, and even cultural life. The ideals of individual freedom or open political discourse are often seen as secondary to unity and national strength. Supporters of Stratocracy argue that it ensures a government led by those who have proven themselves through sacrifice, those who understand the cost of defending a nation and are willing to put its survival above personal gain. Yet the very traits that make the military effective in war, strict hierarchy, unquestioned obedience, centralized command, can become suffocating when applied to an entire society. Citizens may find their lives governed not by laws debated in open assemblies, but by orders handed down through ranks, where the only acceptable answer is yes, sir. A Stratocracy thrives on discipline, but it risks erasing the messy, necessary debates that keep a society adaptable and free. Its strength lies in its unity, yet that same unity can stifle the diversity of thought a nation needs to grow. In the end, a Stratocracy reflects the belief that the sword is not only the shield of the state, but its guiding hand, and when the military holds the reins, the nation marches to its command, for better or for worse. Timocracy is a system where political power is tethered not to birthright or pure wealth, but to the ownership of property and the measure of one's stake in the state. It is a vision of governance built on the belief that those who contribute the most to a nation's prosperity through land, assets, or tangible investment are the ones most fit to lead and decide its course. In its essence, Timocracy sees political rights as something earned, not simply given by birth or citizenship. In a Timocracy, the ballot is not a universal gift, but a privilege reserved for those who meet certain standards of property or contribution. This creates a hierarchy of influence, where the voices of property holders shape the laws, while those without such means remain on the sidelines. Supporters argue that this ensures leaders and voters have a vested interest in the stability and growth of the nation, that they will govern with a sense of responsibility because they have something substantial to lose. But beneath this reasoning lies a divide that is both sharp and deeply human. Those without property find themselves excluded from the political table, their concerns filtered through the priorities of a class whose interests may not match their own. The farmer without enough land, the laborer without holdings, the craftsman scraping by. They may live under the laws, but have no hand in writing them. Historically, Timocracy often emerges in societies transitioning away from monarchies or aristocracies, positioning itself as a merit-based alternative, yet it still carries echoes of exclusivity. It rewards those who achieve economic standing, but it quietly assumes that material success is a sufficient measure of wisdom, virtue, and commitment to the public good. The power structure of a Timocracy can foster stability. Decisions are often cautious, designed to protect property and prevent reckless upheaval, but it can also harden into self-preservation, where the laws favor those already within the circle of power and make it harder for outsiders to ever join. The very standards that claim to ensure responsibility can become barriers that keep political rights in the hands of a select few. Timocracy's most defining trait is its conviction that ownership equals investment, and investment equals rightful authority. In its ideal form, it seeks leaders who act with prudence, discipline, and a sense of stewardship. But in its shadowed side, it risks becoming a quiet gatekeeper of privilege, shaping a nation's destiny through the narrow lens of those who already hold the keys. Geniocracy. Geniocracy is the rule of the intelligent, a system built on the belief that society should be governed not by the majority's will, nor by inherited privilege, but by those whose intellect stands above the rest. It is an unapologetic merit of the mind, a vision in which the brightest, most capable thinkers are entrusted with the responsibility of steering the future. In a geniocracy, Leadership is not a reward for popularity or wealth. It is the natural right of those who can see further, think deeper, and solve problems others cannot. Its appeal lies in its promise of clarity and foresight. Imagine a world where policy is shaped by those who understand every nuance of its consequences, where decisions are made through reason rather than emotional sway, and where the future is crafted with precision, foresight, and an unshakable dedication to truth. A geniocracy sees governance as an art of problem-solving, one best performed by those with the intellectual capacity to navigate its complexities, but this vision carries both light and shadow. Intelligence, while powerful, is not the same as wisdom. A mind can be brilliant in calculation and yet blind to compassion. A leader with unmatched intellect may design systems that are flawless in theory, but suffocating in human reality. When the measure of worth is intellect alone, those who fall below a certain threshold risk being treated as lesser, excluded from decision-making, stripped of influence over the world they must still live in. There is a quiet danger in the elitism of thought that geniocracy can foster. The line between valuing intelligence and devaluing the average citizen is thin, and once crossed, the system risks becoming not a government for the people, but an ivory tower ruling over them. Those outside the intellectual circle may begin to feel invisible, their voices unheard, their lives shaped by decisions they had no part in making. Yet, the dream of geniocracy persists because it taps into a deep frustration, the belief that too often the ignorant make choices that drag entire nations backward. It offers a seductive solution: remove the unqualified from power, place it in the hands of the exceptional, and watch the world transform. But its success depends on whether those deemed the intelligent remember that intellect is not a crown to be worn above others. It is a responsibility to serve them. In forgetting this, the genius risks becoming the very tyrant they once sought to replace. Kritarchy is the rule of the gavel, a system where judges, not kings, presidents, or parliaments, hold the highest authority, and the law itself becomes the supreme ruler. In a Kritarchy, governance is carried out entirely through judicial decisions, and the fate of a society rests in the hands of those who interpret its laws. There are no elected legislators crafting new statutes, no executives wielding sweeping political agendas, only courts delivering rulings that shape the course of a nation. It is a government built on the idea that justice, rather than politics, should guide society. Every decision is bound to legal reasoning, precedent, and the interpretation of written codes. In theory, this creates a system insulated from the corrupting pull of party politics, where truth is measured not by popularity, but by principle. Judges are seen not merely as legal experts, but as the architects of order, tasked with ensuring that every action aligns with the framework of the law. Yet the same concentration of authority that can protect a society from impulsive governance can also bind it in rigidity. In a Kritarchy, change is slow, tethered to the cautious pace of legal interpretation. Progress depends entirely on the willingness of judges to challenge old rulings or reinterpret established laws. When justice is blind, it can be fair, but when it is blind to the suffering of the present, it can become indifferent. The strength of a Kritarchy lies in its promise of consistency, of rules applied equally to all, but its danger lies in the power of perspective. Judges are human, shaped by their own beliefs, values, and biases. A single ruling can ripple across generations, for in a system where the courts are sovereign, the stroke of a pen in a courtroom can carry the weight of an entire nation's destiny. For those living under a Kritarchy, the law is not just a guide, it is the lifeblood of governance. Every dispute, every policy, every change flows through the crucible of judicial decision. It is a system where the people look not to politicians to shape their future, but to robed figures behind a bench. and while the rule of law can protect against the chaos of arbitrary rule in a Kritarchy, the question always lingers: when the law itself becomes the ruler, who holds the power to judge the judges? Noocracy. Noocracy is the rule of the mind, the belief that a nation should be governed by the most intelligent, the wisest, those whose depth of thought and clarity of vision set them apart from the average citizen. It is a system that values intellect as the highest qualification for power, replacing birthright, wealth, or brute force with the authority of ideas. In a noocracy, wisdom is not a luxury. It is the foundation of leadership, the compass by which the state charts its course. To live under a noocracy is to live in a society that elevates knowledge above all else. Leaders are not chosen for their popularity or charisma, but for their proven insight, their ability to see beyond immediate desires to the long-term needs of the nation. It is governance as a form of enlightened stewardship, where policy is guided by logic, evidence, and a deep understanding of human nature. Such a system draws its strength from the belief that the most complex problems cannot be solved by impulse or ambition, but by reason tempered with experience. The appeal of noocracy lies in its promise of competence. Decisions are made not by those seeking personal gain, but by individuals devoted to the greater good, informed by the best available knowledge. Science, philosophy, ethics, all are woven into the very fabric of governance, shaping laws not through the clamor of popular opinion, but through careful consideration of what is truly just and sustainable. Yet noocracy is not without its shadows. Intelligence can be as isolating as it is empowering. The gap between rulers and the ruled can widen if wisdom becomes arrogance, if those in power begin to see the people not as partners in governance, but as subjects too uneducated to understand the decisions made on their behalf. When knowledge is hoarded rather than shared, it can become a tool of exclusion, turning a system meant to enlighten into one that quietly condescends. Still, in its purest form, noocracy represents an aspiration, a society led by those who think deeply, plan carefully, and act selflessly. It is a vision of governance where reason is king, wisdom is law, and leadership is a calling, not a prize. In such a system, the mind does not merely advise the state, it becomes the state itself, a living testament to the belief that the greatest power a nation can wield is the power of thought. Demarchy. Demarchy is a form of governance that strips away the familiar machinery of elections and replaces it with something far older, yet startlingly radical: the random selection of citizens to serve in political roles. It is government by lottery, a system built on the belief that chance, not competition, is the fairest path to representation. In a demarchy, leadership is not won through campaigns, promises, or influence, but granted by the luck of the draw, placing ordinary people directly into the seats of power. At its heart, demarchy rejects the idea that political authority should belong to those most skilled at persuasion or best connected to wealth and power. Instead, it trusts in the sheer diversity of the populace, believing that when a group is chosen at random, it mirrors the society it serves in all its complexities: rich and poor, young and old, educated and self-taught, cautious and bold. The governing body becomes a living reflection of the people, not an elite subset, trained to speak in the polished language of politics. For those selected, the experience is both humbling and immense. One day, they may be living quiet, private lives. The next, they are entrusted with shaping laws, weighing policies, and making decisions that ripple through an entire nation. There is no time to prepare a political persona, only the urgent need to learn, to listen, and to act with the responsibility that has unexpectedly landed in their hands. Demarchy carries a raw honesty. It cannot be bought, lobbied, or manipulated through campaign promises, because it offers no path to power beyond pure chance. But this same unpredictability makes it vulnerable to doubt. Critics question whether ordinary citizens, plucked without warning from their daily lives, can navigate the complexities of governance without years of training or experience. Supporters counter that career politicians often become insulated and self-serving, while ordinary people armed with sincerity, common sense, and lived experience can make decisions with a truer sense of the public good. It is a system that forces society to confront what it truly believes about leadership. Is governance the domain of the practiced and ambitious, or can the wisdom of the people, in its rawest and most unfiltered form, guide a nation's path? In Demarchy, power does not belong to those who seek it. It belongs to those chosen by chance, tasked with carrying the weight of their community, and reminded with every decision that they are not above the people, they are the people. Meritocracy is the belief that power, opportunity, and reward should belong to those who have truly earned them, those whose talent, effort, and achievement set them apart. It rejects the notion that birth, wealth, or connections should dictate one's place in society, replacing it with the idea that greatness should rise from ability and hard work. In a meritocracy, success is not given. It is seized through determination, skill, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. Its allure is undeniable. It promises a fairer world where the ambitious can climb as high as their talent can carry them, where the child of a laborer can one day lead a nation, and where the brightest minds and most capable hands shape the future. It holds out the hope that the doors of power are open to anyone willing to work for the key, and that leadership will always be earned, never inherited. But meritocracy is not without shadows. While it celebrates achievement, it can easily blind itself to the inequalities that shape the starting line. Not all begin the race with the same resources, education, or opportunity, and those born into advantage often have an invisible head start. When this truth is ignored, meritocracy risks becoming a mask, justifying inequality under the claim that those at the top simply deserve to be there. There is also the danger of arrogance among the successful. When achievement is the only measure of worth, those who rise can begin to see themselves not merely as skilled or fortunate, but as inherently better. They may forget the role of community, mentorship, and circumstance in their climb, turning their success into a weapon to judge others who have not ascended as far. Yet, the dream of meritocracy endures because it speaks to something primal in the human spirit, the belief that effort should matter, that skill should be recognized, and that excellence should be rewarded. When practiced with fairness and humility, it can lift the capable into positions where they can serve the many, not just themselves. A true meritocracy demands more than simply rewarding talent. It requires creating a world where talent can emerge from anywhere. It thrives when the path to success is open to all, when hard work and brilliance are not the privilege of the few, but the possibility of the many. In such a world, merit is not just a ladder to climb. It is the very foundation upon which the future stands. Federalism. Federalism is the delicate art of shared power, a system where authority is divided between a central government and smaller regional governments, each with its own sphere of control. It is a balancing act between unity and independence, a recognition that a nation can be strongest when its parts retain the freedom to govern themselves while still belonging to something greater. In federalism, the central authority provides cohesion, defense, and overarching laws, while the states or provinces hold the reins over matters closer to home, shaping policies that fit their unique people and cultures. At its best, federalism is a partnership built on respect. The central government does not crush local identities, and the local governments do not undermine the stability of the whole. It allows a vast, diverse nation to function without demanding uniformity, giving each region the space to preserve its traditions, address its own challenges, and govern according to the will of its people, while still standing under the same flag. Yet this balance is fragile. Too much central control, and the states become mere administrative arms of the capital, stripped of their autonomy. Too much state independence, and the unity of the nation begins to fray, as competing laws and conflicting priorities pull it apart. Federalism's strength lies in cooperation, but when that cooperation turns into open rivalry, the very structure can start to tear. For citizens, federalism can feel empowering. Local governments are closer, more accessible, and more attuned to the everyday realities of their people. A community can shape its own policies without having them dictated by distant leaders who have never walked its streets. But it also means that rights and opportunities can vary widely from one region to another. What is legal in one place may be forbidden in the next, and the quality of life can depend as much on geography as on national policy. Federalism thrives on dialogue, constant negotiation between the local and the national, between the desire for self-rule and the need for unity. It is a system that assumes tension is not a flaw but a feature, believing that the push and pull of competing powers can keep tyranny in check. But it is also a reminder that freedom and unity are not opposites. They are threads woven together, each one weakened if the other is cut. In federalism, the health of the whole depends on the strength of its parts, and the strength of the parts depends on their willingness to remain part of the whole. A unitary state is the embodiment of centralized power, a system where the authority of the nation flows from a single, dominant center and extends outward in one unbroken chain. In such a structure, the central government holds the supreme power, and any regional or local bodies exist only because it allows them to, creations of its will, bound by its decisions, and subject to its control. There is no sharing of sovereignty, no division of ultimate authority. The state is one, indivisible, and commanded from the top. Life in a unitary state is shaped by uniformity. Laws are made in the center and spread across the land like ripples from a single stone, ensuring consistency in governance, policy, and enforcement. To some, this offers a sense of stability and clarity. No confusion over conflicting regional laws, no fragmented authority. It can create a powerful unity of identity, binding distant provinces and diverse populations together under a single national voice. The message is clear. The nation speaks with one authority, and it speaks for all. But this unity comes at a price. In a unitary state, local needs and unique regional identities can be overshadowed by the priorities of the center. The further one lives from the seat of power, the more distant decision-making can feel, as though the policies shaping daily life are crafted by those who have never walked the streets they affect. The local is often sacrificed to serve the national, and voices calling for autonomy may be seen as challenges to the very integrity of the state. A unitary government can act with remarkable speed, passing laws, implementing reforms, and mobilizing resources without the delays of negotiating with multiple centers of power. In times of crisis, this can be a formidable advantage. Yet, the same efficiency that drives action can also drive overreach. With no balance from regional authorities, the central government's will can become absolute, and the people's only recourse is to challenge the very heart of the state. The strength of a unitary state lies in its ability to project a single, cohesive vision. Its weakness lies in its potential to forget that a nation is not only defined by the voice at its center, but by the countless smaller voices that make up its body. When it listens to those voices, the unity it commands becomes unbreakable. When it ignores them, the very centralization that holds it together can become the force that drives it apart. Confederation. A confederation is a union of independent states bound together not by the dominance of a central authority, but by a shared agreement to cooperate while retaining their sovereignty. It is a fragile alliance built on trust, where each member state stands as its own master, yet agrees to join hands with others for purposes too large to face alone: defense, trade, diplomacy, or mutual survival. In a confederation, the central body is less a ruler and more a coordinator, existing only by the consent of its members. The essence of a confederation lies in its promise of autonomy. Each state keeps its own laws, its own government, and its own identity, surrendering only specific, limited powers to the collective. Decisions at the central level often require unanimous or near unanimous agreement, making every member's voice not just important, but essential. It is a structure designed to prevent domination, ensuring that no single entity can dictate the course for all. Yet this safeguard comes with its own cost. The same independence that protects the members can weaken the whole. A confederation can move only as quickly as its slowest or most reluctant member, and in moments of crisis, hesitation can be fatal. If unity falters, agreements fracture, and the alliance may crumble back into isolated states, each left to face challenges alone. Still, there is a deep appeal to the Confederation's promise. It allows for cooperation without surrender, unity without uniformity. Small states can stand alongside larger ones without fear of being swallowed, and cultural identities can flourish without the pressure to conform to a central authority's vision. The power flows upward only as far as the members allow and can be pulled back the moment trust is broken. But the success of a confederation depends on constant balance. It requires an ongoing act of will from each member, a choice to remain committed to the collective good even when it means compromising individual interests. It thrives when the bonds of shared purpose are strong enough to hold through disagreement, and it dies when self-interest outweighs cooperation. In its purest form, a confederation is an act of mutual respect between sovereign entities, a recognition that independence is precious, but strength can be found in standing together. It is a reminder that sometimes unity is not about giving up what makes you unique, but about protecting it alongside others who have made the same choice. Parliamentary system. A parliamentary system is a form of governance built on the close, often delicate, relationship between the legislative body and the executive leadership. Here, the head of government, most often the prime minister, emerges directly from the parliament itself, chosen not by the people in a separate election for the role, but by the elected representatives who form the legislative majority. In this design, the government's strength is rooted in the parliament's confidence, and its survival depends on maintaining that support. The beauty of the parliamentary system lies in its flexibility and responsiveness. A prime minister who loses the faith of the majority can be removed without waiting for the slow march of an election cycle, replaced by someone who can carry the trust of the chamber. This creates a system that can adapt quickly to shifting political landscapes, responding to crises or failures of leadership with immediacy rather than paralysis. Yet this closeness between the legislature and executive is both its strength and its vulnerability. When aligned, it allows for decisive action. Laws can be passed with efficiency, and government priorities can be implemented without endless deadlock. But when fractured, it can spiral into instability, with fragile coalitions breaking apart, leadership changing hands in rapid succession, and governance becoming a revolving door of short-lived cabinets. In a parliamentary system, the head of state, often a monarch or ceremonial president, stands apart from the day-to-day grind of politics, offering symbolic unity while the prime minister handles the machinery of governance. This separation allows the ceremonial figure to embody the continuity of the nation even when the government itself changes frequently. The public's role in a parliamentary system is both direct and indirect. They elect the members of Parliament whose makeup determines the government's leadership. This means a single election can alter the course of the nation not only through new laws, but by reshaping who sits at the helm. The Prime Minister must constantly navigate the shifting tides of public opinion, party loyalty, and coalition politics, knowing that the loss of parliamentary support can bring their tenure to an abrupt end. At its best, the parliamentary system is a living conversation between representatives and the people they serve, a balance of stability and adaptability. But it demands vigilance, for the same mechanisms that allow it to replace failing leaders swiftly can also be wielded as political weapons, turning governance into a game of numbers and alliances rather than a service to the nation. Presidential system. The presidential system is the architecture of separated power, a form of government where the head of state and the head of government are one and the same, embodied in a single elected president who stands apart from the legislature. It is a structure built to prevent the concentration of authority in any single branch, where the executive, legislative, and judicial powers are distinct, each with its own responsibilities, boundaries, and the ability to check the others. The president is not a figurehead, but a leader chosen directly by the people, carrying both the weight of representation and the responsibility of governance. At its core, the presidential system is a safeguard against the old dangers of monarchy and dictatorship. By dividing power, it seeks to make sure no one branch can dominate the rest. The president may propose laws, but cannot pass them. The legislature may pass bills, but the president can veto them. The courts can strike down actions by either if they violate the Constitution. It is a constant, deliberate tension, designed not for speed, but for balance. In its best form, the presidential system offers clarity and stability. The president serves a fixed term, immune from the sudden collapses that can unsettle parliamentary governments. Citizens know exactly who holds executive authority, and that person is directly accountable to them at the ballot box. The system rewards strong leadership, decisive action, and the ability to unite a nation under a single elected figure who must answer not to party bosses, but to the public itself. Yet its strength can also be its weakness. Concentrating executive power in one individual means the health of the system often hinges on the character and integrity of a single person. A wise and principled president can guide a country through crisis. A reckless or corrupt one can exploit their position, erode institutions, and bend the system to their will. And because the president and legislature are elected separately, they can easily find themselves locked in gridlock, each claiming to speak for the people while nothing moves forward. The presidential system thrives on accountability and transparency, but it demands a vigilant citizenry. The president's authority is great, but it is not absolute. It lives within the boundaries of law, shaped and restrained by the other branches. Its promise is simple yet fragile, that the power of one can serve the will of many, so long as the many never forget that even the highest office exists to serve, not to rule. Semi-presidential system. The semi-presidential system is a delicate balance of power, a political structure where authority is shared between two central figures, a president and a prime minister, each holding distinct powers, yet both intertwined in the governance of the state. It is a dual engine driving a single ship, where the president often embodies the nation's unity and long-term vision, while the prime minister manages the day-to-day affairs of government, steering policy through the tides of political reality. This system carries an inherent tension, for it thrives on cooperation, yet constantly tests the boundaries between its two centers of authority. The president may hold the power to shape foreign policy, command the military, and act as the guardian of the Constitution, while the prime minister leads the cabinet, oversees domestic governance, and directs the legislative agenda. Ideally, this arrangement blends stability with flexibility, offering the decisiveness of a strong executive alongside the responsiveness of a parliamentary leader. For citizens, the semi-presidential system can feel like having two guardians watching over the nation, each a check on the other, each capable of tempering excesses and preventing the concentration of too much power in a single set of hands. In times of harmony, the partnership can be remarkably effective, merging strategic leadership with practical governance to move a country forward with purpose and unity. Yet, the same structure that can produce balance can also breed conflict. When the president and prime minister come from opposing political factions, a situation known as cohabitation, the system can shift from cooperative to combative. Policy becomes a battlefield, decisions stall, and the machinery of the state slows under the weight of political rivalry. In such moments, the nation's governance is shaped as much by negotiation and compromise as by clear vision. The semi-presidential model thrives when both leaders understand their roles not as competing claims to power, but as complementary forces working toward the same national good. When trust exists, it can offer citizens the reassurance of a government that is both strong and adaptable. But when ambition overtakes cooperation, the system can turn into a tug of war at the highest levels, pulling the country into political gridlock. At its best, the semi-presidential system is a reminder that leadership need not be singular to be effective, that power, when shared wisely, can be both restrained and empowered, but its success rests entirely on the character of those who hold it, for the system itself is not a guarantee of harmony, but a stage where the drama of cooperation and conflict endlessly plays out. Capitalist state. A capitalist state is built on the belief that the engine of progress is not central planning or collective ownership, but the freedom of individuals and businesses to create, trade, and compete. It is a system where the marketplace is the heartbeat of the nation, and the role of the state is not to own the means of production, but to protect the rules of the game, property rights, contracts, and the freedom to pursue profit. In a capitalist state, economic power is shaped by the choices of millions, each acting in their own self-interest, and it is this web of ambition, risk, and reward that drives the nation forward. At its best, capitalism unleashes human potential. Entrepreneurs can rise from nothing, innovation can disrupt entire industries, and wealth can be built by anyone with the vision and perseverance to seize opportunity. The state stands as a referee rather than a player, ensuring the field is open for competition while letting success or failure be determined by the market's invisible hand. This freedom creates a sense of possibility, a belief that no one's future is fixed, that fortune can be made through effort, ingenuity, and daring. But capitalism is not a gentle system. Its rewards are uneven, and its market forces indifferent to fairness. Those who succeed can shape entire industries, amassing wealth that grants them influence far beyond the reach of most citizens. Those who fail may find themselves left behind, their labor undervalued, their opportunities shrinking. Without careful limits, a capitalist state can slide toward inequality so deep it threatens the very freedoms it promises, as economic power concentrates in the hands of a few and political influence follows the same path. In a capitalist state, the government's role becomes a constant balancing act, intervening enough to prevent monopolies, corruption, and exploitation, but not so much that it strangles the innovation and competition that keep the system alive. The stakes are high because the market is not just an economic space. It shapes culture, opportunity, and even the nation's identity. The capitalist state thrives on motion. It rewards those who adapt, who see change not as a threat, but as a chance to grow. Yet it demands resilience from its people, because in a system where the market decides winners and losers, no one is shielded from risk. It is a world of ambition and uncertainty, where freedom and inequality often walk side by side, and where the promise of opportunity is both its brightest light and its sharpest shadow. Socialist State. A socialist state is built on the conviction that the wealth of a nation should serve the many, not the few, that the resources, industries, and essential services of a society should be owned or controlled collectively, often through the state, to ensure that no one is left behind. It is a rejection of the idea that market forces alone should dictate who thrives and who struggles. Instead, it seeks to weave a safety net so strong that poverty, exploitation, and extreme inequality become relics of a harsher past. In a socialist state, the economy is not simply a marketplace. It is a shared project. Major industries from healthcare to energy are often publicly owned, not to stifle ambition, but to keep life's essentials from being turned into luxuries. The guiding belief is that certain things, education, medical care, housing, are rights, not commodities, and that access to them should never depend on wealth. This vision promises dignity for all, the elimination of desperation, and the creation of a society where everyone has the tools to live fully and contribute meaningfully. Yet the path of a socialist state is not without tension. The same centralization of control that can ensure fairness can also breed inefficiency, bureaucracy, or corruption if left unchecked. Leaders may speak in the language of equality while quietly consolidating power, blurring the line between collective ownership and government dominance. And in the absence of healthy political freedoms, the state's promise of serving all can become an excuse for silencing dissent in the name of the greater good. Still, the heart of a socialist state beats for equity. It challenges the inevitability of vast economic divides, arguing that a society's success should be measured not by the fortunes of its richest, but by the well-being of its poorest. It envisions a nation where no one is reduced to hunger, homelessness, or medical bankruptcy, and where opportunity is not inherited like property, but extended as a birthright to all. Its strength lies in its ability to inspire solidarity, to remind people that they do not stand alone, that their neighbor's welfare is tied to their own. At its best, the socialist state is more than a system of governance. It is a moral stance, a refusal to accept that suffering is simply the price of progress, and a declaration that a nation's greatest wealth is found not in its gold, but in its people. Communist state. A communist state is the pursuit of an idea, a vision of a society without classes, without exploitation, without the vast gulfs between rich and poor. It is built on the belief that all property, all resources, and all means of production should belong not to individuals, but to the community as a whole, managed by the state in the name of the people. In its purest theory, it is meant to dissolve the very concept of private ownership, replacing competition with cooperation and self-interest with collective good. It promises a world where no one goes hungry while others grow fat, where the accident of birth no longer decides a person's destiny. In practice, a communist state centralizes power to achieve these goals. The government takes control of industries, land, and trade, directing resources where it believes they are most needed. Leaders speak in the language of equality, solidarity, and shared sacrifice. Citizens are told they are builders of a new world, one in which the profits of labor no longer flow upward to a privileged few, but outward to everyone. Yet this vision, so stirring in theory, often becomes something far harsher in reality. To maintain control over the economy, the state must also control dissent, for the smallest challenge to its authority is seen as a threat to the collective mission. Political opposition is often silenced, media tightly managed, and personal freedoms sacrificed in the name of unity. The government becomes not merely the manager of resources, but the arbiter of truth itself, deciding what the people need to know, say, and believe. In such a system, equality can become a leveling down rather than a lifting up. While the extremes of wealth may vanish, the abundance promised to all can give way to shortages, inefficiency, and corruption. And when power is concentrated in the hands of a few in the name of the people, those few often begin to serve themselves instead. Still, for many, the dream of the communist state endures, a dream of fairness in a world that has too often been cruel, of dignity in labor, of a society built for everyone, not just for those who can afford it. It is a vision that speaks to humanity's longing for justice, yet also warns of the danger in any system where the power to create equality can just as easily be the power to take everything away. Welfare state. A welfare state is the embodiment of a government that chooses to weave a safety net beneath its people, a system built on the conviction that no one should be left to fall through the cracks of misfortune. It is not merely about governance, it is about care, a deliberate decision to step beyond the role of ruler and become a provider, protector, and stabilizer in the lives of its citizens. In a welfare state, the strength of a nation is measured not only by its economy or military, but by how well it safeguards the vulnerable, uplifts the struggling, and ensures dignity for all. In such a system, the government takes on an active role in securing the basic needs of its people: healthcare, education, housing, pensions, and unemployment benefits. It steps in not as an occasional rescuer, but as a constant presence, ensuring that illness does not mean ruin, that age does not mean abandonment, and that hardship does not mean hopelessness. For many, this creates a profound sense of security, a knowledge that life's unpredictable storms will not leave them stranded. Yet, a welfare state is more than just a safety net. It is a statement about values. It operates on the belief that prosperity is not measured solely by individual wealth, but by the collective well-being of society. It rejects the idea that survival should depend entirely on one's means, instead embracing the principle that a nation's resources are best used to lift all its members, not just the most fortunate. This can create a culture of solidarity, where citizens see themselves as part of a shared social contract, each contributing so that all may stand protected. But the same compassion that fuels a welfare state can also stir debate. Critics argue that such systems risk fostering dependency, discouraging ambition, or burdening economies with unsustainable costs. Supporters counter that it is not dependency, but opportunity that grows from security, that when people are not crushed by the weight of survival, they can build, innovate, and dream. The welfare state walks a fine line, balancing generosity with responsibility. It can be a beacon of fairness, proof that a society can choose empathy over indifference, and yet its survival depends on the will of its people to keep funding, defending, and refining it. When embraced, it becomes more than policy. It becomes a moral promise that no citizen will be abandoned to face life's hardships alone, and that the measure of a nation's greatness is found in the dignity it grants its people. Mixed economy system. A mixed economy system is a deliberate blending of two powerful but opposing forces: the free market's drive for innovation and competition, and the state's responsibility to protect, regulate, and provide for its people. It is a recognition that neither pure capitalism nor complete state control can fully meet the needs of a modern society, and so it forges a middle path, one that seeks to take the best of both worlds while limiting their worst excesses. In a mixed economy, private businesses thrive, compete, and create wealth, while the government steps in to regulate markets, enforce fairness, and ensure that essential goods and services, healthcare, education, infrastructure, are accessible to all. It is a partnership, though often a tense one, between profit-driven enterprise and public-minded governance. The market is allowed to breathe and innovate, but it is not left to run unchecked. The state ensures that the pursuit of profit does not come at the cost of human dignity, safety, or opportunity. The beauty of a mixed economy lies in its adaptability. It can lean toward greater state involvement during times of crisis, such as war or economic collapse, ensuring stability when the market falters. It can also loosen state control when growth and competition need room to flourish. This flexibility makes it resilient, capable of adjusting to shifting circumstances without being bound by ideological extremes. But this balance is fragile. Lean too far toward the market, and inequality can deepen, leaving the vulnerable behind while the wealthy accumulate disproportionate influence. Lean too far towards state control, and innovation can wither, smothered by bureaucracy and inefficiency. The mixed economy is a constant negotiation, its health dependent on wise governance and an engaged public that demands both prosperity and fairness. For citizens, living in a mixed economy means enjoying the dynamism of a market where ambition and creativity can change lives, while also knowing there are safety nets to catch those who stumble. It allows for personal freedom and economic choice, yet acknowledges that society bears a shared responsibility to protect its most vulnerable members. A mixed economy is, at its core, an admission of reality, that no single system holds all the answers. It thrives when the forces of enterprise and regulation move in rhythm, when profit and public good are not enemies but uneasy partners in shaping a nation's future. It is a system that survives on balance, and when that balance is kept, it can offer both the promise of growth and the dignity of security. Corporatocracy. A corporatocracy is the quiet empire of the boardroom, a system where the true power of governance lies not in parliaments or congresses, but in the hands of corporations and the elites who run them. It is a world in which wealth buys not only influence, but control, where the language of profit begins to replace the language of public service, and the invisible hand of the market subtly wraps itself around the levers of the state. In a corporatocracy, laws are written with the fingerprints of lobbyists. Policies are shaped to protect the interests of shareholders, and the boundaries between public duty and private gain dissolve into a single blurred line. Leaders may still stand behind podiums and speak of the people, but behind closed doors, it is the voice of the corporate executive that often carries the most weight. Campaigns are funded, media narratives are shaped, and even regulations meant to safeguard the public can be bent to serve those they were meant to restrain. The appeal of corporate power lies in its efficiency and resources. Corporations can move faster than governments, command vast capital, and innovate in ways the public sector struggles to match. But in a corporatocracy, this strength becomes a weapon. When decisions are driven by profit above all else, human needs can be reduced to line items on a balance sheet, and the worth of a citizen measured in their value as a consumer rather than their dignity as a person. The danger is not always obvious. Corporatocracy rarely announces itself. It seeps in quietly, transaction by transaction, until the public no longer questions why private companies write the laws that govern them, or why the state seems powerless to act against those who fund it. The economy and the government begin to mirror each other, each serving the other's interests until they are almost indistinguishable. And yet, the greatest threat of a corporatocracy is not simply the concentration of power, it is the illusion of choice. People may still vote, debate, and protest, but the range of outcomes is often confined within boundaries set by corporate interests. The rules of the game remain the same, no matter who seems to be playing. In its shadow, democracy becomes performance, governance becomes partnership with profit, and the voices of the many are muffled beneath the steady hum of commerce. In a corporatocracy, the state still exists, but the true sovereign is the bottom line. Colonial government. A colonial government is the rule of the outsider, a system where a land and its people are controlled by a foreign power. Their laws, resources, and destinies shaped not for their own benefit, but for the gain of another nation. It is governance imposed, not chosen, where authority flows from distant capitals across oceans and mountains, carried by ships, soldiers, and administrators who often know little of the lives they command. To live under a colonial government is to live under someone else's vision of what your country should be. From the moment it takes hold, a colonial government begins to reshape the land in the image of its rulers. Native systems of leadership are dismantled or bent to serve the colonizer's interests. Local economies are redirected to supply raw materials for foreign markets, and the wealth of the land flows outward, while the people themselves are often left poorer than before. The culture, language, and traditions of the colonized are pushed aside, sometimes outlawed, as the colonizer's way of life is declared superior and imposed upon the population. Colonial rule is often justified with words like civilization or progress, but beneath those promises lies the reality of exploitation. Decisions are made far away, in offices and courts that will never feel the sting of the policies they create. The people under such a system are rarely more than subjects, taxed without representation, governed without consent, and forced to live within borders and laws they did not choose. Yet, the impact of a colonial government runs deeper than economics or politics. It seeps into identity. Generations grow up under the shadow of foreign rule, where pride in their own heritage is eroded, and loyalty is demanded to a flag that is not their own. Resistance can come in whispers or in open revolt, but it is always met with the full weight of the colonizer's power, for no empire yields its hold willingly. A colonial government is, at its core, a reminder of the unequal world humans have built, one where strength can cross oceans and rewrite the fate of entire nations. For those who live under it, every day carries a quiet knowledge. Their land is theirs in name only, and until that changes, they live in a country that exists more for the ruler who claims it than for the people who call it home. Protectorate. A protectorate is a nation that lives in the shadow of another's power, a state that retains its own identity, yet surrenders a part of its sovereignty in exchange for protection. It is an arrangement born from both necessity and imbalance, where the weaker leans on the stronger, not as an equal partner, but as one who depends on the shield of a mightier force to survive. In a protectorate, independence becomes conditional, shaped and constrained by the terms of the protector's will. Life in such a system is marked by a quiet tension. On the surface, the protectorate may appear self-governing, with its own leaders, culture, and internal laws. Flags still wave, anthems still play, and the facade of autonomy remains. But beneath this image lies the reality that major decisions, especially those involving defense, foreign policy, and often the economy, are heavily influenced or outright dictated by the protector nation. For the people, a protectorate can be both a safeguard and a chain. The presence of the protector can mean security from external threats, stability in uncertain times, and resources that might otherwise be unattainable. In regions plagued by conflict, the protector's presence can be the thin line between survival and collapse. Yet with protection comes dependency, and dependency has a cost. The protector's interests may not always align with those of the protected, and when priorities clash, it is rarely the protector who yields. A protectorate's leaders walk a narrow path, balancing the need to preserve their nation's dignity with the reality that their power is limited. Acts of defiance risk retaliation or withdrawal of support, while total compliance can erode the people's trust in their own government. Over time, this delicate balance can create an undercurrent of resentment, a quiet yearning for true independence, even in the shadow of the benefits protection provides. The protectorate relationship is sustained by the belief, sometimes mutual, sometimes one-sided, that the weaker state is better off under the wing of the stronger. But this arrangement is never without risk. Protection can turn into control, partnership into dominance, and the line between safeguarding and subjugating can blur. In its best form, a protectorate offers safety while respecting the protected nation's soul. In its worst, it becomes a velvet cage, soft to the touch, but unyielding all the same. A client state is a nation that outwardly appears independent, yet its political or economic lifeline is bound to the will of a more powerful patron. It is sovereignty in name but not in full reality, a relationship where the stronger power shapes the weaker one's choices, often behind closed doors, steering its policies, alliances, and even its destiny. To the outside world, the client state may wave its own flag and speak with its own voice, but beneath the surface, the strings are pulled from elsewhere. This arrangement can be born from necessity or coercion. A smaller or weaker nation may seek the protection of a stronger one to guard against external threats, stabilize a fragile economy, or gain access to resources and trade. In exchange, it often accepts conditions, some formal, others unspoken, that bind its actions to the patron's interests. It might vote in alignment with its protector in international bodies, allow military bases on its soil, or adopt economic policies favorable to its benefactors, companies, and investors. The patron power benefits in ways both obvious and subtle. It extends its influence without direct conquest, projecting strength across regions while avoiding the costs of full occupation. The client state becomes a foothold, a political ally, an economic asset, a strategic outpost. To the patron, it is a valuable piece in a larger game. To the client, it can be both a shield and a leash. For the people living within a client state, the reality can be complex. Some see the relationship as pragmatic, a necessary compromise to survive in a world where smaller nations can easily be swallowed by larger ones. Others feel the sting of lost independence, aware that critical decisions about their future are shaped not by the hands of their own leaders alone, but by distant policymakers in another capital. The danger for a client state lies in the slow erosion of true autonomy. The more it relies on its patron, militarily, financially, or politically, the harder it becomes to step away. Choices narrow, sovereignty becomes conditional, and the idea of self-determination fades into something that exists more on paper than in practice. A client state lives in a delicate balance. It must navigate its dependency without surrendering its identity, serve the needs of its people while accommodating the demands of its protector, and hope that the hand holding its leash does not one day tighten into a fist. Occupied government. An occupied government is a nation's soul under foreign hands, a state whose authority has been seized, stripped, and reshaped to serve the will of an outside power. It is governance in name only, where the flag may still wave, but the decisions that shape the people's lives are dictated from beyond their borders. The leaders who remain are often little more than intermediaries, carrying out policies they did not create, enforcing orders they did not choose, and serving masters they did not elect. Life under an occupied government carries a constant undercurrent of quiet defiance and quiet fear. Streets that once echoed with the confidence of self-rule become patrolled by foreign uniforms. Laws arrive from elsewhere, tailored not for the prosperity of the people, but for the benefit of the occupiers. The economy is bent toward extraction, resources flowing outward, labor serving another nation's ambitions, the lifeblood of the country drained to feed a foreign table. The occupied government itself walks a knife's edge. Some within it may see themselves as protectors, trying to shield their people from harsher measures by cooperating. Others embrace the occupier's power for personal gain, becoming instruments of control rather than voices of resistance. To the citizens, distinguishing between the two can be impossible. and suspicion grows like a shadow over every official face. Beneath the surface, resentment smolders. Families speak carefully in public, but in the privacy of their homes, the old songs and stories of independence are whispered to children. Every checkpoint, every confiscated right becomes a memory, a scar carried forward. For some, survival means submission. For others, it means defiance, small acts of disobedience, quiet networks of resistance, and the relentless hope that the occupier's grip will one day break. An occupied government is a constant reminder of what has been taken. Its buildings may look the same, its rituals may continue, but the power that animates them is foreign. The symbols of the nation remain, but hollowed of their meaning, like shells left behind after the life inside has been stolen. And yet, even in the deepest shadow of occupation, the idea of self-rule endures. It survives in whispered prayers, hidden flags, and the unshakable belief that no power, however overwhelming, can erase a people's right to decide their own fate. In the heart of an occupied land, governance may be foreign, but the longing for freedom is entirely, fiercely its own. Legitimate government. A legitimate government is not simply one that holds power. It is one that holds the consent of the governed. Its authority is recognized not because it has the loudest voice, the largest army, or the strongest grip, but because the people themselves accept it as rightful. Legitimacy is a currency more valuable than gold. Without it, laws become mere words, elections become theater, and rule turns into domination. With it, even imperfect governments can stand firm, for their power is rooted in trust rather than fear. Legitimacy can be born from many sources. It may come from fair and transparent elections where the people choose their leaders freely. It can arise from a deep cultural tradition where leadership follows a path the community has honored for generations. Sometimes it emerges in moments of crisis when a government protects its people in ways that earn enduring loyalty. Whatever its source, legitimacy is always anchored in the belief that the government serves the people, not the other way around. The true strength of a legitimate government is invisible. It lies in the willingness of its citizens to obey the law even when no one is watching, to pay taxes not out of fear but out of shared responsibility, to defend the system because they believe in it. This creates stability that no army alone can provide. When people see their leaders as rightful, they endure hardships, accept sacrifices, and work together toward common goals because they trust the hand that guides them. But legitimacy is fragile. It can be eroded slowly through corruption, broken promises, and the abuse of power. A government that stops listening to its people begins to lose its moral foundation, even if it still controls the machinery of the state. It may try to replace legitimacy with intimidation, but fear is a brittle substitute. It keeps people quiet, not loyal. For those who live under a legitimate government, there is a quiet pride in knowing that their leaders' authority comes from their own voices and choices. In such a system, the people do not merely endure their rulers, they claim them because they believe those rulers are there by right, and in that belief lies a power stronger than force, the bond between a people and the government they recognize as their own. Provisional Government. A provisional government is the embodiment of uncertainty in power, a temporary authority born in the space between what was and what will be. It steps into the void left by the collapse, overthrow, or sudden absence of the former regime, not as the final word in governance, but as a stopgap meant to hold the nation together while the future is decided. It is a bridge across unstable waters, built quickly to prevent the current from sweeping the people into chaos. Such a government often emerges in moments of turbulence, after revolutions, wars, coups, or the fall of a long-standing ruler. Its very existence is a sign that the old order has been dismantled, yet the new one is still unformed. Leaders in a provisional government carry a dual burden. They must govern in the present while preparing for their own eventual replacement. Their mandate is temporary, but their decisions can shape the destiny of the nation long after they are gone. Life under a provisional government is a paradox. It can feel both hopeful and unstable, a time when the air is charged with the possibility of change, yet clouded by the threat of uncertainty. On one hand, there is the promise of renewal, a chance to build something freer, fairer, more just than what came before. On the other, there is the danger that instability will harden into disorder, that the transitional moment will collapse into power struggles, corruption, or even violence. A provisional government's legitimacy rests almost entirely on the trust of the people and the belief that it truly serves the nation's best interests rather than clinging to power for itself. It must navigate the competing demands of factions hungry for influence, foreign powers eager to shape the outcome, and citizens impatient for stability. Every decision is made in the glare of scrutiny. Every delay risks losing public confidence. Some provisional governments fulfill their promise, holding fair elections, drafting new constitutions, and stepping aside with dignity when the time comes. Others become consumed by the power they were meant to steward only temporarily, stretching their authority far beyond its intended limits. In either case, the provisional government exists in the fragile moment between past and future, a fleeting yet critical chapter in a nation's story where the seeds of what comes next are planted in soil still unsettled by the upheaval that made it necessary. Transitional government. A transitional government is a bridge suspended between two worlds, the fading structure of the old order and the uncertain shape of what will replace it. It is a government that exists not as a final form, but as an in-between stage, charged with guiding a nation through a moment of profound change, often born from crisis, revolution, civil war, collapse of a regime, or the end of foreign occupation. It carries the heavy weight of both rebuilding and restraining itself, knowing that its authority is temporary by design. In a transitional government, the focus is not on long-term rule, but on laying the foundations for what comes next. It may draft new laws or constitutions, organize elections, restructure institutions, and work to stabilize a society fractured by conflict or mistrust. Its leaders are often chosen through negotiation among competing factions, international mediation, or even the remnants of the previous regime. This fragile coalition is held together by a single, urgent mission: to hand over a functioning, legitimate state to the government that will follow. The power of a transitional government is unique. It is immense in its responsibility, but limited in its lifespan. This creates a constant tension. Every decision must balance immediate stability with the vision of a better future, and the clock is always ticking. Mistakes made during this time can shape the political landscape for generations, either entrenching justice or cementing corruption. The danger lies in the temptation to cling to power. History is full of transitional governments that promised to be temporary but delayed elections, expanded their authority, or became the very regimes they were meant to replace. Without transparency, public trust, and clear boundaries, the bridge can become a destination in itself, trapping the nation in a limbo between democracy and dictatorship. For the people living under such a government, emotions run high. Hope for a brighter future mingles with fear that the chaos of the past will return. Every change is scrutinized, every promise weighed against the scars left by the system before it. A transitional government can be a moment of renewal, a rare chance to rewrite the rules and break cycles of oppression, but it can also be a moment of deep vulnerability where the wrong step can send a fragile nation tumbling backward. A transitional government is, above all, a test, not just of the leaders who hold temporary power, but of the people's ability to stay vigilant, demand accountability, and ensure that the bridge truly leads to something worth crossing toward. Shadow government. A shadow government is the unseen hand moving behind the curtain, a power that exists parallel to the official state but operates outside its authority. It may claim to be the rightful ruler, a government in waiting ready to seize control when the moment comes, or a secretive network already influencing the course of a nation without the public ever seeing its face. In its purest form, it is the embodiment of the belief that the power in office is illegitimate, and that somewhere, hidden from the public eye, the real government is preparing to take its place. Sometimes a shadow government is born from exile, its leaders driven from their homeland but refusing to surrender their claim to rule. From foreign soil, they build their councils, write their manifestos, and wait, sending whispers and directives back home to keep their presence alive in the minds of the people. Other times, it takes root within the very country it seeks to control. Hidden networks of influence, secret alliances, and covert operations subtly steering policy, undermining the sitting authority, and pulling strings that the public will never see. Its existence can be both a lifeline and a threat. For those under oppressive regimes, a shadow government can be a beacon of hope, a promise that someone is working toward liberation, ready to step in the moment the regime falls. But for established democracies or fragile states, it can be a source of instability, a force working to erode legitimacy, spread mistrust, and destabilize the institutions that hold society together. The power of a shadow government lies in its invisibility. It operates in whispers, encrypted messages, secret meetings, and anonymous hands moving resources into place. Its influence is often denied publicly, but felt deeply in the outcomes it shapes. And because it lives in secrecy, it is immune to the normal checks and balances that restrain official governments. There is no vote to remove it, no court to challenge it, no clear face to hold accountable. In its most dangerous form, a shadow government is not just waiting to replace the current power, it is already entwined with it, influencing decisions from the inside while remaining unseen. To the people, the state appears whole, but beneath the surface, another force is quietly writing the next chapter of their nation's story, deciding a future that will be revealed only when it is too late to change. Puppet government. A puppet government is a shadow in the shape of authority, a regime that appears to rule itself, yet dances to the strings pulled by a more powerful force. Outwardly, it may bear the symbols of sovereignty, a flag, a leader, a parliament, even elections. But beneath the surface, its decisions, its policies, and its very survival depend on the will of a foreign power or hidden master. In a puppet government, true control lies elsewhere, and the so-called leaders are little more than actors reading lines they did not write. Such governments often emerge in the aftermath of conquest, occupation, or heavy foreign influence. The controlling power prefers the appearance of independence. It is easier to maintain order when the people believe they still have a government of their own. The puppet's role is to give legitimacy to policies dictated from afar, to sign laws crafted in someone else's capital, to speak the words of autonomy while surrendering the substance of it. For the citizens, life under a puppet government can feel like living inside a carefully constructed illusion. The leaders smile, make speeches, and claim to serve the people, yet when critical decisions are made on trade, defense, rights, or resources, it becomes clear that the real answers are being given somewhere else. Resistance to the hidden power is often met with swift suppression, not because the puppet government is strong, but because it has the backing of the true authority behind it. The tragedy of a puppet government is that it can wear the face of the familiar while carrying out the will of the foreign. It may sign away natural resources, enforce policies that harm its own people, or silence dissent, not out of conviction, but out of obedience. And Because it survives only through the favor of its master, its loyalty is never to its citizens, but to the hand that holds its strings. Yet puppet governments are inherently unstable. The pretense of independence can only hold as long as the people believe in it or tolerate it. Once the illusion shatters, once the strings are seen for what they are, the puppet loses not only the trust of its people, but often its ability to function at all. For no matter how skillfully it plays its role, a government without true sovereignty rules only as long as it is allowed to, and that permission can be revoked at any moment. Failed state. A failed state is a nation that has lost the very heartbeat of governance, a place where the machinery of authority has ground to a halt, and the bonds between the government and its people have unraveled. In a failed state, the law no longer carries weight, institutions no longer function, and the state's most basic responsibilities, protecting its citizens, providing order, ensuring stability, are abandoned to the chaos of collapse. What remains is a shell of sovereignty, a country in name but not in practice. Life in a failed state is defined by uncertainty and fear. Public services vanish or exist only in fragments, and the once familiar rhythm of civic life, schools opening, courts functioning, markets operating under law, gives way to survival in an unpredictable landscape. Roads are unsafe, borders porous, and violence often becomes a constant threat. In the absence of a functioning state, power splinters into the hands of militias, warlords, or criminal networks, each ruling their territory by force. The collapse is rarely sudden. It begins as cracks in the foundation, corruption that rots institutions from within, economic crises that deepen poverty, political divisions that grow too wide to bridge. Over time, these fractures widen until the government no longer holds legitimate control over its territory or population. In some places, the capital may still stand, but its authority fades the further one travels from its walls. For the people, the sense of abandonment can be as devastating as the dangers themselves. Trust in leadership evaporates, and the idea of a shared national identity erodes. Foreign aid may pour in, but without a stable government to channel it, much is lost to theft, mismanagement, or armed groups. Refugees flee in search of safety, leaving behind cities hollowed by fear and countryside scarred by conflict. A failed state is not simply a government in trouble. It is a government that has ceased to exist in any meaningful way. It is the breakdown of the social contract, where the promise of mutual protection and order has been shattered. And yet, even in the ruins, there is often the faint pulse of resilience, communities banding together, leaders rising from the ground up, and the enduring human instinct to rebuild from nothing. But until stability returns, the term state is little more than a memory, and the people are left to navigate the perilous vacuum it leaves behind. De facto government. A de facto government is power in its raw, unvarnished form, a regime that holds control not because it has been legally granted authority, but because it has seized it, claimed it, or simply outlasted the competition. It may lack the official recognition of constitutions or foreign states, yet it commands the armies, polices the streets, collects the taxes, and dictates the lives of those within its reach. In practice, it is the government, regardless of what the law or the outside world may say. De facto, governments often emerge in the wake of upheaval, after a coup, a revolution, a collapse of the old order, or during times when the recognized government has lost the ability to enforce its will. They rise from moments of chaos, filling the vacuum of authority with decisive action, whether through military strength, strategic alliances, or sheer force of presence. The people may not have chosen them, but their reality is inescapable. This is the power you must answer to if you wish to live in peace, or simply to survive. Legitimacy, in the de facto sense, is not about law, but about control. Courts, elections, and constitutions might dismiss the regime's claim to rule, but it does not matter if the machinery of power is firmly in its grip. Checkpoints, armed patrols, and loyal administrators become the proof of its existence. Recognition from the international community may be withheld, yet within its territory, the de facto government's word is law. Such governments live under a constant tension. Their strength is often unquestionable in the short term, but their long-term survival depends on either transforming into a legally recognized authority or maintaining enough force to suppress challenges indefinitely. Enemies, both internal and external, are a constant threat, and every decision is made with the knowledge that a single slip could unravel their hold. For citizens, life under a de facto government can feel like walking a tightrope over uncertainty. The rules are clear only so long as the rulers maintain their grip, and allegiances are dangerous to declare too loudly. Some adapt, working within the system for the sake of stability. Others resist, holding out hope for a return to recognized law. A de facto government is proof that in the realm of power, reality often outweighs legality. It may lack the blessing of law or recognition, but as long as it controls the levers of force and the machinery of daily life, it governs, whether the world wishes to acknowledge it or not. De jure government. A de jure government is the authority recognized by law, the government that, on paper and in principle, holds the legitimate right to rule. It exists within constitutions, treaties, and the formal structures of international recognition. Its power validated not by sheer force, but by legal standing. In the eyes of the law, it is the true ruler, even if in practice its reach may be fractured, contested, or entirely absent. This kind of government often carries with it the weight of history and legitimacy. It might be the product of an election, the successor to a long-established constitutional system, or the officially acknowledged authority by the community of nations. On the global stage, its recognition grants it a seat at the table, the right to sign treaties, and the power to represent the nation in the eyes of the world. Yet, recognition does not always equal control. A de jure government can be honored in name while stripped of real authority, existing in exile or presiding over only a fraction of its claimed territory. Sometimes the de jure government is a distant presence, leaders operating from foreign capitals, issuing decrees to a homeland they cannot physically touch. Other times, it is challenged from within, overshadowed by a de facto power that commands the streets, the army, and the institutions that make laws real. In these moments, the legal truth and the lived reality drift apart, creating a strange tension between what is rightful and what is actual. For its supporters, the de jure government embodies legitimacy, continuity, and the rule of law. It is the rightful guardian of the nation's sovereignty, even if the means to enforce its will have been stripped away. For its opponents, or those living under rival control, it can feel like a ghost authority, a distant name claiming ownership over a land it cannot govern. The de jure government survives on recognition, both domestic and international, and on the hope that law will one day align again with power. In times of conflict or occupation, it becomes a symbol, a reminder that might does not erase what is legal, and that the rightful claim to rule can outlast the one who holds the throne. Yet, until law and reality reunite, it remains a ruler in title, waiting for the day when its authority will no longer be just words on paper. Emergency government. An emergency government is born in the heat of crisis, a form of rule that rises when a nation faces danger so great that ordinary laws and limits are set aside. It might come in the wake of war, a devastating disaster, an economic collapse, or an uprising threatening the stability of the state. In these moments, leaders claim extraordinary powers, arguing that speed, unity, and decisive action are worth more than the slow processes of normal governance. The usual balance between liberty and authority tilts heavily toward control, and the machinery of the state shifts into a mode built for survival. Under an emergency government, laws can change overnight. Freedoms that once felt untouchable, speech, movement, privacy, can be restricted in the name of security. Curfews are imposed, military forces patrol the streets, and decisions that would normally be debated in open chambers are made behind closed doors. The justification is always the same. In extraordinary times, extraordinary measures are needed. To some, this can feel like protection, a shield against chaos when danger is close. Swift decisions save lives, coordinated action prevents collapse, and the clear voice of authority cuts through confusion. In such moments, people often accept the trade, a temporary loss of freedom in exchange for safety. They tell themselves it will be short-lived, that once the crisis passes, the country will return to normal. But the danger of an emergency government is not only in its power, it is in its duration. What begins as temporary can quietly become permanent. The very tools designed to defend the nation can be turned toward controlling it. Leaders who taste unchecked authority may be reluctant to give it back, and a frightened public can be slow to demand it. What is justified in the heat of danger can be abused in the calm that follows. Living under an emergency government means living in tension, trusting that the power taken will be returned, hoping that those who wield it are guided by necessity rather than ambition. It is a system forged for the moment, not the long haul, and it stands on a fragile promise that once the storm passes, the walls built to defend the people will not become the prison that confines them. Single-party state. A single-party state is a nation where political power is bound tightly in the grip of one ruling party, a system in which no rival organizations are permitted to challenge its dominance. In such a structure, the party is not merely a political entity. It becomes the spine of the state itself, shaping its laws, directing its policies, and defining its identity. The government and the party are indistinguishable, their fates intertwined so completely that to oppose one is to oppose the other. Life under a single-party state is defined by uniformity in politics and an absence of open competition. Elections may still occur, but they are often a formality, a carefully managed performance designed to maintain the image of public participation while ensuring the ruling party's unbroken control. The laws, media, and education systems are often aligned to promote the party's ideology, presenting it not just as a political choice, but as the natural and unquestionable order of society. Supporters of a single-party system often point to its ability to act decisively and with unity. Without the gridlock of multiple factions fighting for influence, policies can be implemented swiftly, long-term plans pursued without interruption, and national direction maintained with consistency. In times of crisis, this can bring stability, preventing the political paralysis that can plague multi-party governments. Yet the same unity that brings efficiency can also breed stagnation and suppression. Without the challenge of opposition, the ruling party risks becoming complacent, insulated from the needs and frustrations of the people. Criticism can be treated as disloyalty and dissent as a threat to the state. Voices that question the party's actions often find themselves silenced, marginalized, or punished, and citizens learn that survival depends on loyalty or the appearance of it. In a single-party state, the boundaries between patriotism and obedience blur. The party may present itself as the guardian of the nation's future, the sole protector of stability and prosperity. For some, this fosters a deep sense of unity and pride. For others, it feels like a narrowing cage where individual thought must yield to collective conformity. Over time, the system's greatest strength, its concentrated control, can also become its greatest vulnerability. for when the ruling party falters, there is no alternative ready to take its place, and the entire structure stands at the edge of collapse. Multi-party system. A multi-party system is the political arena at its most vibrant, a stage where multiple voices, visions, and ideologies compete for the trust of the people. It is a rejection of one-dimensional politics, replacing the monotony of a single narrative with a chorus of perspectives, each vying to shape the nation's direction. In this system, no one party owns the future. Instead, the path forward is forged through competition, coalition, and compromise. At its heart, a multi-party system recognizes that a nation is not a monolith. Its people are diverse in culture, values, and priorities, and a single political banner cannot capture them all. Here, different parties rise to speak for different segments of society: workers, entrepreneurs, environmentalists, conservatives, progressives, nationalists, centrists, each carrying the hopes and grievances of their supporters. This creates a political marketplace of ideas where the people choose, compare, and challenge the visions presented to them. The beauty of a multi-party system lies in its ability to prevent dominance. Power is divided, often requiring parties to work together in coalitions to form governments. These alliances demand negotiation, forcing political leaders to find common ground rather than rule unchecked. This cooperation can give citizens a sense of balance, knowing no single ideology can easily impose itself without scrutiny. Yet the very diversity that strengthens a multi-party system can also make it unstable. When too many voices pull in different directions, forming a functional government can become a slow, fragile process. Coalitions can fracture, elections can become frequent, and the constant bargaining can frustrate those longing for decisive action. In moments of crisis, the need for unity can clash with the reality of political division. For citizens, a multi-party system offers choice, real, tangible choice. It allows them to support leaders who reflect their beliefs more closely rather than settling for the lesser of two evils. It opens the door for new movements to rise, for fresh ideas to challenge the established order, and for marginalized voices to find a place in national debate. A thriving multi-party system is noisy, restless, and often messy. But beneath that mess lies its greatest strength, the belief that no single voice should speak for all, and that the health of a democracy is measured not by silence, but by the clashing, converging, and evolving chorus of its people's will. One-person rule. One-person rule is the pure concentration of power into a single set of hands, a system where one individual's will becomes the axis on which an entire nation turns. In such a state, there are no real rivals, no meaningful checks, no balancing forces to restrain the ruler's reach. Decisions that shape millions of lives can be made in a moment, not after debate or negotiation, but at the impulse of one mind. It is authority distilled to its rawest form. Often, one-person rule emerges in moments of crisis, a war, an economic collapse, or political chaos, when people, desperate for stability, rally behind a single figure promising to cut through disorder and restore order. At first, there can be relief in the clarity it brings. No bickering parliaments, no fragile coalitions, no endless compromises, just action, swift and decisive. But over time, that decisiveness becomes domination, and the voice that once spoke for the people begins speaking only for itself. Under one-person rule, loyalty replaces law as the true currency of survival. Institutions bend to the ruler's will, the judiciary becomes a tool rather than a safeguard, and dissent turns from a civic right into a dangerous act. Fear seeps into public life, fear of speaking out, fear of being noticed, fear of attracting the ruler's disfavor. In such an environment, even the most trusted allies tread carefully, for the same power that elevates can just as easily destroy. The ruler's presence becomes everywhere, on currency, in speeches broadcast daily, in the narratives of schools and media. History is rewritten to glorify their image, and the idea of the nation becomes entwined with their name. To oppose them is framed not just as political dissent, but as betrayal of the country itself. Yet one-person rule is inherently fragile. No matter how invincible it appears, it rests on the health, the will, and the control of one human being. Remove that person through death, defeat, or uprising, and the system often collapses into chaos. Its power structures built to serve one, not to sustain themselves. For those who live under it, one-person rule is a paradox. It can bring stability, but only as long as the ruler's interests align with the people's needs. And when they do not, the nation becomes a reflection of one individual's ambition, fears, and flaws, its fate rising and falling with the mood of a single mind. Anarchism. Anarchism is the rejection of rulers, a vision of society built not on hierarchy and impose authority, but on the belief that people can govern themselves without masters, kings, presidents, or parliaments. It is not chaos, as it is so often portrayed, but the radical idea that order can arise from cooperation rather than control, that communities can organize through mutual agreement instead of laws handed down from above. At its heart, anarchism is the conviction that human beings, free from domination, can shape fairer, more humane systems than any imposed government could create. In an anarchist society, power is decentralized, decisions are made collectively, and responsibility is shared. There is no state to dictate laws, no army to enforce obedience, no elite to hoard wealth or privilege. Instead, people form networks of voluntary cooperation, resolving conflicts through consensus and building systems that reflect their shared values. It is an idea that demands both freedom and accountability, because without rulers to force order, individuals must take responsibility for their own actions and for the well-being of their community. The appeal of anarchism lies in its promise of liberation. No one is born into servitude, no one's voice is silenced by those with more power, and no law exists simply to protect the privileged. It offers the dream of living without the weight of institutions that too often corrupt, exploit, and divide. To its believers, it is the ultimate expression of human dignity, life without coercion, guided only by the agreements we choose to make. Yet anarchism is also a fragile ideal, for it assumes a level of mutual respect and cooperation that human societies often struggle to maintain. Without centralized authority, there is the risk that the strong can still dominate the weak, that communities can fracture into rival groups, and that conflicts can escalate without a clear path to resolution. Still, to many, anarchism is not merely a blueprint for a stateless world. It is a challenge to the present, a demand that we question why power is concentrated at all, and whether we truly need the structures we have accepted as inevitable. It is both a vision of freedom and a test of human nature, daring us to imagine a society where the only chains that bind us are the ones we willingly forge together. Panarchy. Panarchy is the radical reimagining of governance itself, a vision in which individuals are free to choose their own system of government, not by changing nations or borders, but by selecting the rules under which they wish to live. In a panarchic society, there is no single authority that binds all citizens to the same political framework. Instead, governance becomes personal, tailored to the values, beliefs, and preferences of each person, much like choosing a religion, a school, or a profession. To live under panarchy is to inhabit a world where political identity is no longer dictated by geography. Your neighbor might live under a constitutional monarchy, while you choose a socialist republic, and another household aligns with a libertarian framework, all within the same physical community. There are no revolutions to topple one system for another, no elections where the majority imposes its will on the minority. The act of governance becomes voluntary, contractual, and fluid, driven by choice rather than coercion. This idea carries an almost intoxicating promise: the end of political conflict as we know it. If you disagree with the rules of your government, you simply leave, not in body, but in allegiance, signing up for a system that resonates with your ideals. Panarchy envisions a marketplace of governments, each competing for citizens by offering better laws, fair treatment, or more appealing services. The people, in turn, become not passive subjects, but empowered customers, holding the power to leave if the system fails to serve them. Yet the freedom of panarchy also brings immense complexity. How does law enforcement work when neighbors answer to different authorities? How are disputes resolved when the parties involved live under separate legal systems? Panarchy demands a level of tolerance, negotiation, and mutual respect rarely seen in history. It assumes that people can coexist peacefully while living under entirely different rules, a concept both inspiring and daunting. For some, panarchy represents the purest expression of liberty, a society stripped of the coercive monopoly of a single government. For others, it feels dangerously idealistic, a structure that could fracture into chaos without shared norms and responsibilities. Still, its allure lies in its boldness, the idea that governance can be as personal as belief, as chosen as friendship, and as fluid as the human spirit. In panarchy, the state is no longer an immovable authority, but a service you consent to, shaping a world where freedom begins not at the ballot box, but in the ability to decide who, if anyone, governs you at all. Anarchism is the rejection of imposed authority, the belief that society can exist without rulers, without a central state, without a towering hierarchy to dictate the terms of life. It is not chaos for the sake of destruction, as it is often misrepresented, but a vision where people govern themselves through voluntary cooperation, mutual aid, and shared responsibility. In the heart of anarchism lies a radical trust in human beings that, left free from domination, they can create systems of order without the chains of coercion. To an anarchist vision, laws handed down from a distant authority are not the foundation of justice. They are the tools of control. Instead, justice comes from the agreements people make with one another, shaped by consent and mutual respect rather than imposed power. Decisions are made collectively, and communities organize themselves from the ground up, not the top down. There is an undeniable allure to this freedom, the idea that no one stands above you, that your life is yours to shape without the permission of a state or ruler. It offers the promise of equality stripped of titles, of a society where cooperation replaces command, and where the bonds between people are chosen, not enforced. But anarchism carries immense challenges. Without a centralized authority, there is no single institution to enforce order, protect rights, or coordinate large-scale efforts. Its success depends entirely on the willingness of individuals to take responsibility for the whole, to work together, even when personal interest tempts them to walk away. It demands a level of trust, solidarity, and shared vision that can be hard to sustain in the face of greed, conflict, or fear. For its critics, anarchism is a dangerous gamble, a leap into uncertainty where the absence of authority could allow the strong to prey on the weak. For its supporters, it is the only true freedom, a rejection of the idea that safety and justice must come from being ruled. Anarchism is not an easy dream to hold. It asks the most difficult question of all. If no one holds power over you, can you still live in a way that protects the dignity and freedom of everyone else? One-person rule. One-person rule is the purest form of concentrated power, a system where all authority, political, legal, and often even moral, rests in the hands of a single individual. In such a state, there is no distribution of power, no competing institutions, no meaningful opposition. The ruler's will is not just law, it is the source from which all law flows. Every decision, from matters of war and diplomacy to the smallest details, of daily governance depends on the mind and mood of one person. To live under one-person rule is to exist in a world where the fate of millions can shift with a single command. Stability can be absolute when the ruler is wise, decisive, and just. Decisions are swift, policies are clear, and there is no uncertainty about who holds responsibility. For some, this can feel secure. There is no political chaos, no messy debates, no prolonged stalemates. The leader becomes the embodiment of the nation itself, a living symbol of unity and authority. But the same concentration of power that brings stability also carries immense danger. When there are no limits, no checks, and no counterbalances, the ruler's flaws, greed, fear, pride, become the flaws of the entire state. The people have no recourse when decisions are unjust, and dissent is often crushed before it can take root. Loyalty is expected, obedience demanded, and criticism treated as a personal threat to the throne. One-person rule thrives on control of information, of institutions, of the narrative that binds the people to their leader. The ruler may present themselves as the savior of the nation, the guardian against chaos, the sole figure capable of steering the country through danger. And in times of crisis, this can feel true, yet the entire system stands on a knife's edge because it depends not on principles or institutions, but on the character and lifespan of a single human being. When the ruler is gone, whether through death, overthrow, or abdication, the state often plunges into uncertainty as there is no structure strong enough to survive without them. One-person rule is, at its core, a gamble, the hope that the leader's vision will be benevolent and wise, against the risk that their unchecked power will become the very force that breaks the nation they control.